During my upbringing, my life resembled what many might consider a fairy tale. My name is Evelyn Harrison, born into the esteemed Harrison family, known for its influence in our city. Though our name frequently graced the headlines for various events, behind closed doors, we were simply a typical family. My father helmed Harrison Industries, a colossal conglomerate spanning industries from technology to fashion. Despite growing up in opulent mansions, attending prestigious schools, and embarking on lavish vacations, I never quite felt tethered to that affluent lifestyle. I found solace in the simple pleasures of reading and engaging in heartfelt conversations with close companions. At one of our family gatherings, I encountered Daniel, a departure from the familiar faces of privilege. He wasn't born into wealth. Instead, he was catering the event. His laughter was genuine. His eyes sparkled with an authenticity I hadn't witnessed in a long time. "You're Evelyn, right?" he asked, extending a drink. I nodded, and he introduced himself with a warm smile. Our ensuing conversation flowed effortlessly, as if we had been lifelong friends. Daniel opened my eyes to a world beyond my privileged bubble. Several months into our relationship, I introduced Daniel to my family. When my father inquired about his profession, Daniel confidently stated he was a caterer. My mother welcomed him graciously, expressing pleasure in meeting him. As our bond deepened, I became acquainted with Daniel's parents, who resided in a modest home among amiable neighbors. As our love blossomed, I often used my father's resources to pamper Daniel and occasionally gifted tokens of appreciation to his parents. Sharing my blessings with those I cherished brought me immense joy. Then, one morning, my father summoned me urgently to the office. His tone conveyed urgency, leaving me perplexed and anxious. I hastily prepared and made my way to Harrison Industries, where the office hummed with activity. Entering my father's office, I was met with an unusual atmosphere. Conversations were subdued, and numerous faces wore expressions of concern. Dad sat behind his imposing desk, surrounded by scattered papers, his complexion pale, as if he hadn't slept in days. "What's going on, Dad?" I asked, my voice laced with worry. Taking a deep breath, he struggled to find the right words. "Harrison Industries is declaring bankruptcy," he finally confessed. My heart sank. "What do you mean? How did this happen?" I collapsed into a nearby chair, trying to digest the news. Our life was about to change drastically. Returning home, I paused at the door, grappling with how to break the news to Daniel. Sensing my distress, he immediately inquired, "Evelyn, what happened?" Taking a deep breath, I shared the devastating news. Daniel looked stunned. "But how?" "We've been facing losses, but I had no idea it was this bad," I admitted, tears welling in my eyes. He enveloped me in a comforting embrace. "We'll get through this, Evelyn, together." From there, events unfolded rapidly. Our luxurious apartment, filled with memories of our love, became the first casualty. My father's assets were frozen, and our lavish lifestyle evaporated overnight. "We'll have to move in with my parents," Daniel suggested one evening, as we sat surrounded by packed boxes. "At least until we figure things out." I nodded, swallowing my pride. "It's just for a short while," I reassured myself. Little did I know, the true challenges of our relationship were only beginning. Without the safety net of wealth, we embarked on a journey fraught with uncertainty. Moving into the Thompsons' house was a stark contrast to the opulent spaces I was accustomed to. Their home was warm and inviting, albeit smaller than what I was used to. But I reminded myself it was temporary. Initially, everything seemed fine. Mrs. Thompson cooked delicious meals, and Mr. Thompson shared captivating stories from his youth. However, as days turned into weeks, subtle shifts in behavior became apparent. Simple gestures, like Mrs. Thompson's watchful gaze when I took an extra serving of dinner, or Mr. Thompson's habit of turning off lights prematurely, hinted at underlying tension. One morning, while setting the breakfast table, Mrs. Thompson made a remark that struck a chord. "You know, Evelyn, back in our day, we would only use one type of jam for breakfast, not three. Helps save money," she said casually, eyeing the array of jars on the table. Suddenly feeling self-conscious, I replied softly, "I'll keep that in mind." Daniel began to change as well. The easygoing, jovial person I fell in love with seemed distant. He would snap at small things and return home from work visibly stressed. Concerned, I broached the subject one evening. "Daniel, is everything okay at work?" I asked, noting his exhaustion. He sighed heavily, admitting, "It's just stressful. We need money, and I'm doing everything I can." I reached out to comfort him, suggesting I could look for a job too. His response stung. "Maybe you should. It's high time," he retorted. This shift in attitude was further illuminated one Saturday as I overheard a conversation between Daniel and his parents. "She doesn't understand the value of money, Ma. She's lived a silver spoon life," Mrs. Thompson remarked. My heart sank as I realized they saw me as a burden. Despite my efforts to adapt and contribute, every action was scrutinized, every decision questioned. Attempting to fit in, I took up a job, contributed to expenses, and cut down on personal spending. Yet, the once warm household now felt cold and unwelcoming. Evenings that were once filled with laughter grew silent, tension lingering in the air. Simple joys like celebrating birthdays became a distant memory. It became evident that the financial strain was not only impacting our lifestyle, but also our relationship. As time passed, the divide widened, and I couldn't shake the feeling that things would only get worse. Months into our stay, Mr. Thompson's birthday approached. In previous years, it had been marked by a simple family dinner at home. However, this year, they decided to celebrate at a nearby restaurant, inviting me to join them. I felt a mix of hope and anxiety. It was a chance for us to bond as a family again, away from the confines of the house. Maybe things could start to improve. Perhaps this dinner could be a turning point. On the evening of the celebration, I made sure to dress modestly, not wanting to invite any negative comments. As we entered the restaurant, I took in the familiar ambience, a place I had visited many times before under different circumstances. The waiter led us to a reserved table, and I noticed some patrons glancing at us, recognizing me from the old days. The thought made me slightly uncomfortable, but I pushed it aside. We settled in, and menus were handed out. Glancing through, I noted the prices. Back when my family was affluent, such numbers would have been insignificant. But now every dollar counted. Wanting to be considerate, I decided on a relatively inexpensive dish. Daniel spoke up. "I'll have the steak, medium rare," opting for one of the pricier items on the menu. His mother chose lobster, while Mr. Thompson opted for a full 3-course meal. I felt a bit surprised, but said nothing, waiting for my turn to order. As I was about to speak, Mrs. Thompson interrupted. "She'll have the garden salad and tap water." I was taken aback. "Actually, I was thinking of the chicken," I started to say. But Mrs. Thompson's voice had a sharp edge. "The salad is plenty. We need to be mindful of our expenses." I felt humiliated, cheeks burning as I sensed the eyes of nearby tables on us. Daniel chimed in, chuckling, "Yeah, Evelyn can't always get the fancy stuff anymore." My heart sank. This was the man I loved, the man who once promised to stand by me through thick and thin. Before I could muster a response, Mr. Thompson added, "You should be grateful. Some people don't even get bread." Their laughter echoed in my ears, and a heavy lump formed in my throat. I felt like a spectacle, humiliated in front of an audience. Summoning all the strength I had, I said, "I may not have the money I once did, but I still have my dignity." Standing up, I left the table, the restaurant, and the whispers behind. The dinner, which I had hoped would be a turning point, had turned into a disaster. But it was also an awakening. I realized that while money could be lost and regained, some relationships were damaged beyond repair. As I walked out into the cool night, I felt more determined than ever to find my way out of this mess. Morning rays streaked through the room, and with a heavy heart, I made my way downstairs. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee contrasted sharply with the cold atmosphere that greeted me. There, sitting around the breakfast table, were Daniel, his father, and his mother, the events of the previous night still fresh in their minds and mine. The silence was palpable. Eager to break the tension, I decided to address the elephant in the room. I understand last night was uncomfortable for everyone. Can we discuss it? I ventured. Daniel's mother scoffed. Uncomfortable? That's one way to put it. It was downright embarrassing, Evelyn. His father chimed in. What were you thinking? Making a scene in a public place over something as petty as a dish. Daniel looked at me, his eyes void of the warmth they once held. You could have taken it up with us privately, he said. I was hurt. I defended myself, trying to keep my emotions in check. When I saw that you all intentionally ordered the cheapest dish for me, it felt like a slap in the face. It's just food, Evelyn, Daniel said dismissively. No, it's not just about the food, I countered, my voice trembling with anger and hurt. It's about respect, understanding, and love. I turned to Daniel, searching for any trace of the man I fell in love with. Do you even love me, Daniel? Or was it always about the money? I asked, my heart pounding. He hesitated for a moment, then replied with a smirk. Money is a significant addition to love, isn't it? His words hit me harder than anything before, filled with cynicism and devoid of emotion. To add salt to the wound, his mother added, You were never a good fit for our family, always spending without thinking. Now you're just a freeloader. The hurt was too much to bear. The walls of the house, which once felt welcoming, now seemed to close in on me. Without another word, I turned away, my heart heavy, realizing that the love I thought was unbreakable was built on a foundation of convenience and materialism. Tears blurred my vision as I drove the familiar route to my parents' home. Every turn, every tree brought back memories of a life that now felt worlds away. I wasn't sure how my parents would react, but I needed the comfort of home. The driveway looked the same, lined with the roses my mother loved so dearly. As I stepped out of the car, the front door opened, revealing my mother's worried face. Evelyn. She rushed towards me, pulling me into a tight embrace. Her warmth was an immediate solace, and I allowed myself a moment to just be held. Pulling back, she cupped my face, her eyes scanning for answers. What happened, my love? She asked, concern evident in her voice. I swallowed hard, recounting the events of the past few months, ending with the disastrous dinner. She listened intently, her face a mixture of concern and anger. Oh, Evelyn, she sighed. You deserve so much better. I thought they loved me. I thought Daniel loved me, I said. Sometimes adversity reveals people's true colors, she said softly. We were interrupted by the sound of my father's footsteps. He had a newspaper in hand, an amused expression on his face. Is that my daughter I hear? He said, feigning surprise. Dad. I chuckled through my tears. He enveloped me in a hug, then held the newspaper out to me. The headline read, Jackson Enterprises. From the brink to booming. We're back on track, he said with a smile. I looked at him, shocked. But how? It turns out the financial crisis wasn't as severe as we thought. With some smart moves and a bit of luck, we've not only recovered. I blinked back fresh tears, this time of relief. Why didn't you tell me? I asked. He shrugged. I didn't want you to worry. Besides, I wanted to see who truly cared for my daughter, money or no money, he replied, earning a scolding glance from my mother. You and your tests, John, she said with a sigh, but a hint of amusement in her voice. I laughed. Typical Dad. We spent the evening reminiscing, the warmth of my childhood home providing the comfort I so desperately needed. As night fell and I lay in my old room, I realized that while I had lost a partner in Daniel, I had regained something far more valuable. My self-worth and the unwavering love of my family. No amount of money could replace that. The weight of the recent events left an indelible mark on my soul, but it also gave me newfound clarity. With renewed determination, I made my way back to Daniel's parents' home one last time, a suitcase in one hand and a folded newspaper in the other. Daniel, caught off guard, looked at me. Evelyn, what are you doing? Ending this charade, I replied calmly, handing him the divorce papers. His face went pale, and he stammered, "What? What is this?" "Exactly what it looks like." "I'm done, Daniel," I said firmly. His mother, with a smug look on her face, chimed in, "Good riddance. We knew you'd come to your senses and leave our son. It's for the best." Suppressing the urge to snap back, I unfolded the newspaper and handed it over to them. The headline gleamed, "Local business tycoon's company makes remarkable comeback." Daniel's father took the newspaper, reading aloud, his voice quivering. After facing potential bankruptcy, the company managed to not only stay afloat, but has also seen unprecedented growth in the past few weeks. My gaze never wavered. "You were so eager to label me a freeloader. It turns out life has a funny way of showing us who truly is shallow." I left the house with no intention of ever looking back. Over the next few days, my phone was inundated with calls from Daniel. Messages full of regret, apologies, and pleas for a second chance. And just when I thought I had heard the last from them, postcards started arriving at my parents' home. Picturesque landscapes with scribbled messages from his parents, each bearing the same desperate sentiment: "Forgive us." But their words meant nothing. The pain and humiliation they had put me through were still fresh in my mind. One evening, after yet another call from Daniel, I decided it was time to put an end to this. Answering the phone, I said, "Daniel, I've moved on. Your calls, your parents' postcards, they mean nothing. We had our time, and it's over." The line went silent for a moment before he whispered, "I'm sorry, Evelyn, but apologies weren't enough. I was done giving chances. It was time to rebuild and focus on myself, far away from the toxic web of deceit and conditional love." My phone buzzed with a message. It was from Jenny. "Hey, heard there's a new art gallery opening downtown. Want to check it out?" I quickly typed back, "Absolutely. Let's go." That evening, the gallery was brimming with people, and the art ranged from vibrant paintings to intricate sculptures, each piece telling a unique story. Jenny and I moved from one exhibit to the next, soaking in the creative atmosphere. At one particular painting, a depiction of a phoenix rising from the ashes, I felt an odd connection. It mirrored my own journey. Jenny, noticing my fixation, commented, "It's beautiful, isn't it? The idea of rebirth, rising from adversity." I nodded. "It's symbolic. Reminds me of, well, everything." Later, as we grabbed a bite at a nearby cafe, Jenny looked thoughtful. "You know, there's this workshop next week. It's about rediscovering oneself, finding one's passion. Want to give it a shot?" My initial hesitation was evident, but then I thought, why not? Sure, let's do it. Over the next few weeks, the workshop became a transformative experience. I dabbled in different activities, finding solace in painting. It became a therapeutic outlet for my emotions, each stroke reflecting my innermost feelings. One evening, after a particularly intense session, the workshop instructor approached me. "Your work, Evelyn, it's exceptional. Have you considered showcasing it?" The idea had never crossed my mind. "No, I haven't. But thank you," I said. He smiled. "Think about it. Your art tells a story, and it deserves to be shared." Days turned into weeks, and soon my small home studio was filled with paintings. The once unpacked boxes now contained art supplies. The transition was evident. From a woman scorned to an artist reborn. My father, ever the supportive figure, suggested organizing an exhibition, and with a little persuasion, I agreed. The opening night of the exhibition was a blur. Friends, family, and even strangers admired my work. The Phoenix painting, inspired by the gallery visit, was the star attraction. The evening concluded with a surprise. The workshop instructor approached, holding a check. "A buyer, Evelyn, for the Phoenix painting," he said. Stunned, I stared at the figure. It wasn't about the money, but the validation. My journey, my pain, my rebirth. It had resonated with someone. As the day settled and the exhibition came to a close, I realized that life was full of unexpected twists. But with each downfall, there was an opportunity for a new beginning. My past with Daniel was just that. In the past, I had found my passion, my calling, and for the first time in a long time, I was genuinely happy. Life had come full circle, from pain to passion, from despair to hope. It was indeed a new beginning, and I was ready to embrace whatever came my way. As my husband and I stepped out of the car, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law eagerly approached him. "Hey Matthew, what's with this car? It's amazing. I'm glad you finally decided to live on our side of society. But still, it's a bold move to buy such a luxury car out of the blue," my sister-in-law remarked. My husband chuckled and replied, "This is not my car, it's Nani's father's car." "What?" my mother-in-law and sister-in-law exclaimed simultaneously. As my parents got out of the car, my in-laws were absolutely stunned when they saw them dressed so elegantly. "What an expensive-looking suit, and I've seen that outfit before. It's such a high-end brand. Why are Nani's parents wearing such expensive stuff?" "My name is Nancy, a 28-year-old office worker, and I married my husband Matthew last year. My husband has always been kind to me since we started dating, taking good care of me. We share household chores because we both work. Despite my husband having lived alone for a long time and being proficient at house chores, he's also a better cook than I am. Depending on what we cook, we support each other and live a very happy life. However, there are people who stand in the way of our happy married life, my in-laws. They assume I'm poor and say whatever they want to bully me." "Why do they assume that I'm poor?" "Perhaps it was because of the dinner party where we greeted each other's families before our marriage." My in-laws consist of my parents-in-law, sister-in-law, and my husband. My father-in-law was a banker and reasonably wealthy. Everything he wears has a brand name, and they seem to think that wearing expensive things is a status symbol. Interestingly, my husband is the only one in the family who isn't interested in such things. He buys second-hand clothes online and wears them proudly, often believing they're worth more than their original price. When I met my in-laws for the first time, they had personalities and tastes that I couldn't imagine from my husband. I even wondered if my husband was adopted. It seems that the reason why he lived alone for so long was that he didn't share the same values as the rest of his family members. He began living alone as soon as he entered college because they believed that being wealthy equated to justice. When they met me and my parents for the first time, I had a very negative impression of them. My father runs a small factory, and as soon as they found out, my in-laws and sister-in-law made fun of him, saying, "He runs a factory. Well, a president of a factory with a name I've never heard of must surely be poor. A big bank where I work would never give him a loan." Their abusive remarks left a sour taste, even though it was our first meeting. I questioned the character of my in-laws. I would have been furious if my husband hadn't apologized to me in advance. My parents had also been briefed by my husband on the situation, so they remained calm, even when my in-laws made fun of us. "Well, it's true that we run a small business, but thankfully, we're able to continue working and pay our employees' salaries," my father responded calmly. "I wonder how many employees you have," one of them sneered. "Oh, by the way, I heard Nancy has an older brother," another chimed in. "Our son is working today. He can't join us," my father explained. "Is he on a business trip or something?" "Does your brother work for a decent company?" they mocked. "Our son works for my company," my father stated proudly. When he said that, my in-laws laughed in unison. "You mean it's a family business? A family that can't even take a day off must not be running the business very well," they taunted. They continued saying terrible things about my family. My husband repeatedly told them to stop, but they wouldn't listen. Eventually, my husband forced them to leave. This incident tarnished my image of my in-laws, especially as they made fun of my family too. To be honest, some people might have canceled the marriage after such an incident, but I love my husband more than that. So I decided to marry him as long as I didn't have to deal with my in-laws. We could live peacefully and happily. In fact, my husband doesn't like his family much either, and I was quite angry at them for making fun of my family. So, We avoided going to my in-laws unless absolutely necessary. However, about a year after we got married, they started to force us to get involved with them. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law came to our house often, saying whatever they pleased. Matthew doesn't come home at all. It just means she's trying to stop him from going, they speculated. I'm sure she's jealous of our lives, one of them remarked. Well, I don't blame you. We have a different standard of living than the poor, but I hope you'll at least have a baby soon. If you don't produce an heir, she's really just a scumbag wife who wants to make a fortune, they said nastily. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law were there for a short time from when I came home from work until my husband came home. I usually arrived home early because my job allowed me to leave on time, but my husband often had to work overtime. So he usually gets home a little before 9:00 p.m. So, within about 3 hours, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law would come over to pick on me. Matthew works for a good company. You should live in a nicer house, they would comment. My husband, and I think it's big enough for us, I would reply. So, not your husband, but you, right? Don't impose your values on Matthew, they'd retort. There's a lot of plain stuff in the fridge. Don't look in the fridge without permission. You don't have caviar, they'd sneer. Fine, we don't have anything like that, I'd reply. Oh, it's so boring. Why did Matthew marry this woman? A poor, well-seeking, boring woman is a rarity, they'd mock. You could say that, but if you try to touch your money even a little bit, you'll be sorry. It will erase you from society, they'd threaten. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law would make fun of me, threaten me, ridicule me, and then leave. I would talk to my husband about it, and he would scold them. But they continued to come over without showing any sign of remorse. They ambushed me at my apartment when I came home. I felt depressed every time I came home. How on earth could they get tired of picking on me? But my mother-in-law and sister-in-law kept trying to belittle me. I had a mental breakdown. I tried to pass the time at a cafe until my husband finished work, then I would go home with him. When my mother-in-law and sister-in-law saw me coming home with my husband, they said, "You're like a pest, taking away Matthew's freedom like that." It was actually more disgusting that they waited outside for 3 hours and tried to antagonize me. My husband was so disgusted that he even went so far as to ask my father-in-law for help. My husband talked to my father-in-law, but he was just like my mother-in-law. He said that a poor wife is a rarity for them. If things continued as they were, our marriage would be threatened. I decided to use the L resort. I know it's not something I'm very fond of doing, but my in-laws have made me angry, so I will not relent. A few days later, my husband and I went to visit my in-laws. They were overjoyed when we informed them that my husband was taking his wife home with him. I was horrified to hear my mother-in-law saying, "I'm so happy to see Nancy for the first time in a long time. I don't know what kind of fun it is to be a wife-beater." And then we went to my in-laws' house for the weekend. When we'd arrived at my in-laws' house by car, my in-laws rushed out of the house and excitedly asked my husband, "Hey, Matthew, what's with this car? It's amazing. I'm glad you finally decided to live on our side of society. But still, it's a bold move to buy such a luxury car out of the blue, isn't it?" My husband chuckled and said to my mother-in-law and sister-in-law, "This is not my car. It's just Nancy's father's car. What's with this car? It's amazing. I'm glad you finally decided to live on our side of society. But still, it's a bold move to buy such a luxury car out of the blue," my mother-in-law and sister-in-law exclaimed simultaneously. Then, as my parents got out of the car, my in-laws were absolutely stunned when they saw the two of them dressed like that. What an expensive-looking suit, and I've seen that outfit before. It's such a high-end brand. Why are her parents wearing such expensive stuff? They marveled. Finally, my brother emerged from the car, standing tall and handsome, wearing the same high-end brown suit as my father. "Who is that handsome guy? Nice to meet you. My name is Finn, Nani's brother." He introduced himself. My in-laws were frozen in amazement at my family, which was completely different from the last time they saw me. Seeing this, my husband exclaimed, "What the hell are you doing?" He urged them to quickly show my family around the house. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law hurriedly invited my family into the house, showing them into the living room, and said, "We'll have tea ready for you right away." Their attitude was the complete opposite. The in-laws were very curious and asked my parents, "How are you able to wear such luxury items? So ridiculous." My father explained, "My factory is a small one, but the parts we make are the only pattern in the world. We receive orders from large Japanese companies as well as foreign companies." This answer made the members of my in-laws' faces turn blue. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law started to be nice to me, while my father-in-law remained silent the whole time. My sister-in-law was particularly interested in my brother and talked to him a lot. "What kind of work do you do at your father's company?" she inquired. "I've always been good at English. I'm currently in charge of organizing business meetings with overseas companies, so I spend half of the year abroad," my brother explained. "That's very cool." "Are you single, Finn?" she flirted. "No, I'm married," he replied. "That's too bad. But I think I'm a better match for you than your wife. What do you think? If you're interested, why don't we go out for dinner?" she boldly propositioned. To be honest, I was impressed by her mental strength and audacity, but I was also determined to let her face the consequences of her actions right then and there. My brother looked at me and nodded in agreement. "Are you kidding me, Finn? You're a funny girl. I mean, are you seriously saying that you're more desirable than my wife?" "My wife is a former model, highly educated, and the daughter of the president of a famous company. You're lower than her," my brother countered firmly. "No matter how you look at it, it's funny how half-rich people miss just their position, isn't it? I don't say anything bad about you, so you should know your size and follow a solid path." My brother's words struck a chord. My sister-in-law was in a groggy state, on the verge of fainting. She was so shocked that she could no longer speak. Finally, my father turned to my stepfamily. "I don't really care how wealthy the other family is. Money is certainly important, but you can't measure a person's worth by money alone. Let's be human and not be obsessed with money. I'm sorry we were a little mean to you today." My father bowed his head in apology. My family-in-law was completely horrified and apologized profusely. Since then, my family-in-law has never tried to bully me. In fact, they regularly contact me to flatter me. It's a bit bothersome that they contact me so often. By the way, neither my parents nor my brother are the kind of people who dress up in luxury brands and brag about their wealth. They just cooperated with my plan this time. My father likes to wear a suit he has had for a long time, even if it's cheap. He's not interested in luxury. My brother is very kind and doesn't make fun of people. That's why his wife's father likes him so much. He even asked my brother to take over the company because he's a better heir than his eldest son. I'm sorry I put my family through something they're not used to. Everyone was extremely tired on the way home. Thus, I was able to return to a peaceful married life with my husband. I have not visited my in-laws since then, but my husband visits them at least during Thanksgiving and Christmas. After that event, my in-laws changed their ways. They seem to have lost confidence, or maybe they just repented themselves. They don't brag about being rich like they used to. My husband even says that he feels most comfortable with them now. Well, I'm not sure if they'll go back to their old ways again. For now, I'm just glad that the problem has been successfully resolved. I will continue to take care of my husband and my family. I'll try to live my life with a sense of modesty. They thought they were mounting up, but actually, the other family member made money many times more than they did. The in-laws should be ashamed of themselves. I would feel like a small person if I keep trying to mount the poor. I don't think the view which people would do such a thing. I think it's good that you were able to give your family-in-law a good scolding. I hope you will continue to live every day with your family in good harmony. Hey everyone, I'm Yasmin, and I've got a story to share about my mother-in-law, Jessica. She's quite the character, let me tell you. My husband, Key, thought it would be a good idea to share this story here because, well, he enjoys reading these kinds of tales sometimes. And trust me, It's not surprising considering his mother's antics. He's been dealing with her craziness since day one. He was her first target, after all. Let me start from the beginning. Key grew up with Jessica, who was once married to his dad. Unfortunately, that didn't last long, and his dad made a run for it soon after Key was born. He couldn't handle Jessica's wild ways. Then came Jessica's next romantic misadventure with a man who abandoned Key, leaving his dad to pay child support until he decided to cut ties altogether. I've never met the guy, and honestly, I have no desire to. Jessica claims she single-handedly raised Key, but the truth is far from that. She used him as a cash cow, milking his family for as long as she could. When that well dried up, she begrudgingly got a job, but still had her hand out for money whenever she pleased. And when Key hit his teens, she put him to work, pocketing all his earnings until he turned 18. Key knew he needed to escape the cycle, so he took out loans and secured a scholarship to get into college, where we met. From the get-go, he'd regale me with horror stories about his mother, and I couldn't help but feel enraged on his behalf. I'd often ask him why he still maintained contact with her, but his answer was always the same. He felt obligated due to his upbringing under her narcissistic reign. I urged him to seek help, to break free from her manipulative grasp, and eventually he agreed. With some coaxing and love, I managed to get him started on therapy, using my own savings to cover the costs. It was a tough journey, but he began to find his footing and started to push back against his mother's demands. Of course, Jessica didn't take kindly to this newfound independence. She saw me as the villain, accusing me of manipulating Key against her. She couldn't see that it was her own actions pushing him away. Despite her protests, Key stood by me, defending my actions and asserting his own boundaries. Therapy worked wonders for Key, and as time passed, he grew stronger, more assertive. Jessica, on the other hand, remained stubbornly stuck in her ways. Fast forward a few years, and Key and I have graduated college and tied the knot, leaving Jessica's drama in the rearview mirror. Both of us landed solid jobs, the result of our hard work during college. We scrimped and saved, opting for a modest backyard wedding at my parents' place to stash away funds for a future home. Meanwhile, Jessica's life took a turn for the worse as she married Frank, a disrespectful man who couldn't hold down a job. Frank's freeloadery continued as Jessica incessantly badgered Key for money until he reluctantly agreed to foot the bill for an apartment. She seemed content with the arrangement until news of our house purchase reached her ears. Suddenly, she was all smiles, congratulating us on our new digs before dropping a bombshell. She and Frank expected to move in. Needless to say, I was taken aback. "Excuse me? What are you talking about?" I countered. But Jessica remained resolute, insisting that they were moving in with us. I had to set the record straight. "Jessica, we jointly bought this house. I contribute too. And by the way, I don't live here rent-free like you do in the apartment. Key covers your rent." Jessica's response was predictably defensive. "Watch your mouth, Yasmin. I won't tolerate disrespect." But I stood my ground. "I have a right to speak, Jessica. This concerns my home as much as it does Key's." I emphasized that neither she nor Frank would be moving in. "That's for my son to decide, and he knows it's not his obligation to house you. I'm already taking care of you, Mom." Jessica wasn't having it. "Keith, you owe me," she insisted. "You need to take responsibility for your mother." But Key remained firm. "Neither of you will be getting a copy of our keys. This conversation is over." You'd think that would be the end of it. Well, the drama didn't end there. For days on end, Frank and Jessica bombarded us with calls, trying to guilt-trip us into letting them move in. Jessica even went as far as hurling insults at me, accusing me of manipulating Key. At first, it was almost comical, but soon it became unbearable. Frustrated with their persistence, Key decided to pay them a visit at their apartment to reiterate that they wouldn't be moving in. We thought our message had finally gotten through when the calls stopped. Problem solved, or so we thought. But about a month after settling into our new home, We were looking forward to a well-deserved vacation we'd been saving up for. It was meant to be a peaceful getaway by the beach, just the two of us. We switched off, ready to unwind. But as evening fell, things took a shocking turn. A notification from our Ring camera system alerted me to activity at our front door. We'd installed the cameras before leaving, just in case. I couldn't imagine who would be showing up uninvited, considering our neighborhood was typically quiet. Curious, I checked the live feed on my phone, only to be met with a sight that left me speechless. There on the screen was Jessica and Frank hauling bags of clothes into our home. They'd somehow gained access and were setting up camp in our guest room, with Jessica even making herself at home in the kitchen. I was livid and knew I had to get Key on the line immediately. "Keith, we need to talk. Something's happened," I said urgently, knowing I had to break the news to him. Despite being on vacation, this couldn't wait. Key's initial annoyance quickly turned to shock as he watched the footage. His expression hardened. "Leave it to my mother to surprise me in the worst possible way," he muttered, clearly furious. It was crystal clear. Jessica had completely disregarded our boundaries, and we made it abundantly clear that day that she would not be living with us. I'm baffled as to how they got their hands on our house keys. It's mind-boggling. Frank's sleazy nature makes me worry he might have copied our keys without us knowing. Changing the locks seems like the only solution to ensure they can't just barge in whenever they please. But as for the current problem, I'm leaning towards involving the authorities. What they're doing is not only illegal, but also downright frightening. Trusting them anymore feels impossible. Calling the cops and cutting off contact might be the best course of action. I gave Key some time to mull over the idea, seeing the furrowed lines on his forehead as he weighed our options. Surprisingly, his response was more resolute than I anticipated. "Let's do it," he said firmly. I couldn't help but ask, "Are you sure about this?" There's no turning back once we involved the police. But Key was steadfast. They'd betrayed my trust one too many times. There have to be consequences. I pressed further, asking if he'd be willing to cut off contact with them as well. "Of course," he replied, regret lacing his words. "I should have done it ages ago. It's time to distance myself from them." With Key on board, we formulated a plan. But first, he decided to give his mother a final warning. Maybe, just maybe, she'd come to her senses. Key called her, but she didn't pick up at first. Through the security cameras, we could see her and Frank in a huddle, likely discussing our call. When she finally answered, we put it on speaker so Frank could hear too. "Hey, Keith, how's the vacation?" she asked, feigning ignorance. But I wasn't having it. "Breaking into our house isn't something to brush off, Jessica," I interjected. There was a tense silence on her end, and she exchanged a glance with Frank, who seemed adept at deception and manipulation. It was evident that Jessica had anticipated this confrontation, likely expecting her husband, Frank, to come up with some sort of defense. She immediately accused me of being crazy and demanded Key to silence me. But Key wouldn't stand for it. "Don't talk to my wife like that," he asserted. Jessica's tone turned accusatory, claiming we were spying on them with cameras both inside and outside the house. She seemed offended by our intrusion into their privacy, which struck me as ironic given her own invasion of ours. Unsure if she was deflecting or genuinely offended, I couldn't help but retort, "That's rich coming from you, Jessica. You broke into our home against our wishes." But Jessica remained defiant, insisting that as Key's mother, she had a right to be there. Key, however, stood his ground, reminding her of the apartment he already provided for her. Their presence in our home was unwelcome, and we demanded answers about how they obtained the keys. Frank's admission confirmed our suspicions. "I made a copy of your keys," he confessed brazenly. Enraged, Key rebuked him, but Frank asserted his authority as Key's stepfather. The tension escalated as Key challenged Frank's actions, labeling them as forgery and illegal. Jessica attempted to justify Frank's actions, claiming a mother should have access to her son's home for emergencies. But her flimsy excuse didn't hold water. We gave them an ultimatum. Leave within the hour or we'd involve the authorities. Their panic was palpable as they huddled together, whispering frantically. Through the cameras, we could see their fear-stricken faces, realizing the consequences of their actions. In their final attempt to assert control, Frank and Jessica disregarded our ultimatum and refused to leave. They dismissed my warnings, claiming the house belonged solely to Key and that I had no authority. But we stood firm, reminding them that it was our home too, and we wanted them out before involving the police. As the hour passed, we observed them through the surveillance cameras, seeing Jessica unpacking her bags defiantly. Anger boiled within us, but we refused to engage further, recognizing that reasoning with their entitled mindset was futile. When we called the police, they arrived promptly, and we watched as they confronted Jessica and Frank at our doorstep. The officers explained the situation, and Jessica and Frank attempted to feign confusion. But when confronted with the evidence, they changed their tune, pleading with Key to let them stay. But Key remained resolute, refusing to cave in to their manipulation. Despite their pleas and excuses, he demanded they leave immediately. However, Jessica's revelation left us dumbfounded. She had canceled their lease and sold their furniture, expecting us to house them. Key's anger reached its peak upon hearing this betrayal. He refused to entertain her excuses, insisting they vacate his house. Despite Jessica's desperate pleas, Key stood firm, unwilling to compromise his boundaries. But Jessica continued to plead, appealing to Key's sense of familial duty. "Do you want your mother to be homeless? Mom, since you've made yourself homeless by canceling your lease, I won't be giving you any more rent money. I'm done," Key declared firmly, unmoved by Jessica's tears and pleas. Despite her attempts to guilt-trip us, we stood our ground, refusing to entertain her manipulative tactics. Both Key and I were furious at their audacity and crossed boundaries. We shouted at them and ended the call, immediately blocking their numbers. The cops ensured that Jessica and Frank left our house, and we arranged for a trusted friend to house sit until our return. We also had the locks changed for added security. Frank and Jessica's departure marked the beginning of their downward spiral. They tried to garner support from relatives, but no one sided with them, knowing Jessica's history of drama. They attempted to harass us with new phone numbers, but failed to gain any traction. During our vacation, we kept our phones off, only checking for emergencies once a day. Despite their persistent attempts to intrude, our friends successfully thwarted their efforts by threatening to involve the authorities. Upon our return, we learned that Frank had left Jessica because she could no longer house and support him for free. Desperate, Jessica begged Key for help, finally realizing the consequences of her actions. However, Key remained steadfast in his decision to maintain no contact. Recently, we heard from family that Jessica now lives in a trailer and works at a retail store, with retirement nowhere in sight. It's a stark reminder of the consequences of her entitled behavior and manipulation. Hey guys, I'm Athena. Though I'm not the youngest around here, I've got a story you might find interesting. It's about how I finally got back at my ex, Kingston, and his mom, Mary. Took nearly 8 years post-divorce. But hey, revenge is a dish best served cold, right? Now I'm flying solo, and honestly, after the roller coaster of my marriage, I'm not exactly eager to dive back into dating. But hey, at least I've got my revenge to keep me company. Kingston and I met through work, thanks to a colleague's cousin. Sparks flew at one of those anniversary parties. At first, he was all charm and sweetness. Sure, he wasn't swimming in cash, but I saw something in him, so I took a chance. Things were great initially. We were that couple, couldn't keep our hands off each other. But as time went on, Kingston's true colors started showing. He criticized my spending habits, saying I was too frugal. Like seriously, just because I earn more doesn't mean I gotta splurge at all, right? But nope, he kept pushing, making me feel like I was hiding my money from him. Total BS. His words stung, sure, but I figured maybe I was being unfair. I mean, I did earn more, so maybe I should be spending more, right? Yeah, I fell for that trap. So I tried to make him happy, even footed most of the wedding bill myself. And don't get me started on household expenses. I was coughing up over 70%. At the time, I thought I was just being a supportive partner. Ha! Talk about being blind to the truth. However, I never imagined I'd be taken advantage of in the name of love. Just a few months after marrying Kingston, his mom moved in with us. Yep, she just waltzed right in with her suitcases. She goes, "So Athena, surprised to see me? Well, get used to it. I'm moving in." What? Hold on, Mary. Who gave you the green light to just barge into our house and make yourself at home? Calm down, Athena. I invited Mom over. She's staying with us now. Why all the drama? She can't fend for herself forever. But Kingston, we never discussed this. How could you make such a decision without consulting me? Look, you make enough money to take care of all of us. So I didn't think I needed to consult you. Besides my mom, my money, my house. I was livid with both Kingston and Mary for disrespecting me like that. But I had no choice but to let Mary stay. Our rented house was in both our names, even though I was the only one footing the bills. Kingston hardly ever had money for anything. In the 5 years we were together, he never bought me a single gift. Now, I'm not one for extravagant gifts, but his lack of effort in the relationship bothered me. And then I was stuck paying for his mom, who didn't lift a finger around the house. One day, I couldn't take it anymore. I confided in a colleague about Kingston and Mary, and his face fell. I knew he was hiding something. When I pressed him, he dropped a bombshell. Kingston was addicted to gambling. He'd lost his previous job for stealing cash. I felt like my world was crashing down. At first, I refused to believe it, but then he showed me screenshots of their conversations, with pictures of Kingston gambling with girls around him. I was sickened. I marched home and confronted Kingston. "I know all about your gambling, Kingston, and your theft. What's wrong with you?" "Please, Athena. Not everyone wants to be a penny-pinching middle-class worker like you. I'll make millions. I'm getting good at it. We'll be rich soon." "You're out of your mind, Kingston. And where did you get the money for your gambling?" "Your savings account had some good cash. Came in handy for my games." I froze. One betrayal wasn't enough. He'd secretly been dipping into my savings. I was devastated, screaming at him for touching what was mine. I'd worked tirelessly for years to build up those savings, only to watch them disappear due to Kingston's gambling addiction. As our argument escalated, Mary intervened, predictably siding with her son. "My son is smart, Athena. He'll hit it big with gambling. You're picking fights for no reason. Your money is his money, and he can spend it however he likes." "Absolutely not. That money was earned through hard work and sacrifice. I've been shouldering the household expenses practically solo, unaware that Kingston had lost his job and resorted to stealing from me to fund his addiction. Don't insult my son like that. He's doing you a favor. You're incapable of success on your own. Only Kingston can make something of his life. You're useless." "Useless? You have some nerve calling me useless when you've been using my money. Neither you nor your son have lifted a finger to help me. I'm done with both of you. Kingston is a failure who will never amount to anything. I'm leaving." That was the moment I knew I had to divorce Kingston. Despite my love for him, the betrayal was too much to bear. I couldn't stay with a man who thought nothing of squandering my hard-earned money on gambling. I'd grown weary of our marriage long before. Kingston had shown no signs of improvement, so I made the decision to file for divorce. But getting an amicable divorce was a nightmare. My ex pulled out all the stops, begging me to stay before resorting to blackmail, threatening to take half my assets and demand alimony. His mother joined in, harassing me to reconcile. It took months of legal wrangling, with my lawyer finally convincing him to relinquish his claims to alimony and his share of the assets. I even threatened to press charges for bank theft due to his unauthorized withdrawals, which ultimately forced him to sign the divorce papers. At the end of it all, I still lost a significant amount of money due to Kingston's gambling. But even then, Kingston and Mary had one final insult to throw my way. "You haven't won, Athena. You're just a worthless witch. Sure, you might be earning a lot now, but mark my words, one day I'll be richer than you. You'll come begging to me for money. We won't forget this insult, Athena. You abandoned my son and me when we needed you. One day you'll pay for it. Kingston will be more successful than you. Oh, we'll see about that. Let's wait and see who ends up doing the begging. Once the divorce was finalized, I left my job and moved to another state, eager to start fresh and put as much distance between myself and Kingston's family as possible. I landed a lucrative promotion, working hard and climbing the ranks over the years until I became a director, a dream come true. Meanwhile, Kingston continued his gambling habits and squandered whatever little money and assets he had left. He and Mary eventually moved to my state to escape their debtors. But then, a twist of fate, Kingston married a wealthy heiress, Riley, whose father was a business associate of mine. He complained to me about Riley and expressed suspicions about his new son-in-law. He also griped about Mary, calling her a freeloader. I stayed silent, knowing it wasn't yet time to take my revenge. Life was good for me until Mary unexpectedly called one day. "Hello, Athena, it's Mary. I hope you haven't forgotten me." How could I forget Mary? The dear mother-in-law who mooched off me for years and helped her son steal my money. What's up? Well, Athena, my son isn't the failure you claimed. He's married to a beautiful girl now and has a new job that pays him $120,000 a year. Looks like he's finally successful. Your loss. I couldn't help but laugh. To me, her words were absurdly funny. Most of what she said was a lie. But she didn't realize that I already knew the truth. Instead, she seemed quiet and confused. When I finally got my laughter under control, I said, "First of all, dear ex-mother-in-law, Kingston only gets $60K a year. There's no reason to lie to people, you know. And yes, I already have all the information about him." "What do you mean? Are you accusing me of lying to you? And who told you that he earned $60K? Well, no one had to, Mary. Do you want to know how I found out? My assistant was the one who interviewed him yesterday. That's impossible. There's no way you're related to the company. It's a big enterprise, and you're just a worthless woman. Here's some news for you, Mary. I am a director at this company, so I'm well aware of how much Kingston can actually get. By the way, you're bold assuming he has got the job. Well, my son is pretty smart and won't have trouble getting the job. You and I both know that. Here's some more news for you, Mary. I checked his name on the list of candidates, and my assistant placed him at the bottom. Like I said 8 years ago, no sane company would hire him with a gap in his record. And don't worry, I will gladly inform his beautiful wife just how you and Kingston have been fooling her." When I said this, Mary started to change her stance completely. I could tell that my words got to her. She might be old, but she's not that dumb. I knew she had already Googled to see if my name popped up in the company. By now, she knew that I wasn't lying. So, Mary resorted to begging. "Okay, Athena, look. I see you've made it big in life, but you should also understand that my son has a lot of contributions to your success. You should keep that in mind and give him the job. Can't you just stop making me laugh, Mary? After everything you two have done, do you expect me to help you? I mean, you called me today to gloat about Kingston's apparent success. I just want people to know that he's not a loser. I was trying to prove a point. Anyway, he's married to a rich and beautiful girl. I'm sure she's even richer than you and will support him. Is that so, Mary? Then I think you will have no problem with me telling her the truth. I did see you on her Facebook. She thinks her husband has a 120 job and owns a lot of properties. Mind if I tell her the truth? No, Athena, listen to me. Don't do this to Kingston. You've come so far in life. Why do you want to dwell on the past? Have some pity on us and give Kingston the job. This is the least you can do after being such an unsupportive wife." I made it abundantly clear to Mary that I wouldn't lift a finger to help Kingston. He was perfectly capable of destroying his own reputation, and I had no intention of vouching for him, not even professionally. So instead of bothering me with their fake boasts, Mary should focus on helping her son find a job. Trust me, she would need all the luck she could get. After that, I hung up the phone, ignoring Mary's subsequent calls. I had no interest in indulging her tantrums. Instead, I swiftly got to work, instructing my assistant to send rejection letters to all the unsuccessful candidates, including Kingston. I wanted him to experience his humiliation firsthand. True to form, Kingston called me within an hour of receiving the rejection letter. I picked up, eager for a front row seat to his humiliation. He sounded desperate, nothing like the arrogant jerk I'd divorced. "What do you want, Kingston? I see that my dear ex-mother-in-law gave you my number already. Athena, I know you're one of the directors at the company I interviewed for. I just got the rejection letter. Please do something and help me get the job. I know you can help if you want to. Why do you think I would jeopardize my professional life for you? Do you think I'm mad? You have some nerve to ask me for a job after all these years. Look, I know I didn't treat you right back then, but I was still your husband. We do have some good memories. Please consider those and give me the job. My wife, Riley, will leave me if I don't get a job soon. I know that you've lied to Riley about your financial situation. Guess what, Kingston? I know her family. I also have her number from her dad. All I have to do is tell the truth and let her be free." Kingston went silent after hearing this. I knew I'd hit the jackpot with this information. My real revenge had just begun. He immediately started begging me not to tell Riley about everything. I hung up on him without another word. Next, I sent a quick text to Riley, asking her to call me. I explained who I was and hoped Kingston hadn't reached her before me. When she did call, I didn't mince words. "Hi, Riley. My name is Athena, and I'm your father's friend. I also happen to be the ex-wife of your now husband. There are a few things you should know about Kingston. He has been lying to you." "What do you mean, Athena? What is he lying about?" "Well, I guess you think he's pretty rich and up to your family standards. Well, he's not rich at all. You posted on Facebook that he got a 120 job. I'm the director of the company he mentioned, and he only applied for a 60-grand job, which he didn't get." "What the hell are you talking about?" "But he told me." "I know what he told you, Riley. I've seen it on your Facebook. I know you might not believe me, but you can ask your dad. He can easily find out if Kingston is lying." "But I don't understand. Why would Kingston lie to me?" "Because he wanted to take over your inheritance and properties. He always wanted a luxurious life for himself, and he's a gambler. Unfortunately, we divorced because I refused to fund his lifestyle, support his gambling habits. His mother supports him. Anyway, I don't know what he told you, but that's the truth. You can ask around if you're doubtful about me. I don't want you to be stuck with a liar and a loser." "Thank you, Athena. I'll dig for more information and find out. Also, don't worry. I made him sign a prenup and only agreed to remove it once he gets a job. Looks like that won't be happening after all." With that, I finished my part of the revenge. The aftermath was glorious. Mary and Kingston initially kept calling me and begging me to help them. Meanwhile, Riley was on Kingston's case and uncovered the truth herself. Her father was also furious and promised to see the end of Kingston's lies. After 2 days, the tone of the texts I received from Mary and Kingston changed. They called me a witch and a jerk for destroying Kingston's marriage. Riley and her dad confronted him and filed for divorce. Since Riley still had the prenup in place, none of her assets would go to Kingston. Instead, Kingston would now have to hire a lawyer to work through the divorce. Mary and Kingston kept harassing me until I threatened to expose them online. That made them stop contacting me. Last I heard, Kingston still comes by our company to see if there's a position open. Sources say that Mary and Kingston are constantly fighting about money problems. I guess now Mary will finally know what it's like to be stuck with a man-child for the rest of her life. Cancer. Our family has a lengthy history of cancer. She'd always been exceedingly cautious about her health. Nonetheless, tragically, she succumbed to breast cancer. She was just 42, far too young to pass. It's nearly a decade since our divorce, yet memories of her still haunt my heart. My name is David Johnson. I encountered Emily, who would become my spouse, through a mutual acquaintance. She was an aspiring surgeon, and I had recently become a physical therapist. When I was in elementary school, my beloved grandmother succumbed to cancer. I wept so intensely I hyperventilated. Since then, I vowed to become a doctor to spare others the anguish of losing a loved one to illness. Her words resonated with determination and purpose. I fell in love with her for that. Her unwavering gaze, perhaps due to our shared medical backgrounds, fostered a strong bond between us, leading to dating and eventual marriage a year later. However, our relationship gradually drifted apart. She began crying alone more frequently. When I inquired about her well-being, she would dismiss it with a laugh, insisting, "Don't worry, I'm fine." She always had a tendency to conceal important matters and keep them to herself. Later, through medical connections, I heard rumors about Emily. Supposedly, she faced constant discriminatory remarks at work, such as "because you're a woman" or "for a woman." This made it challenging for her to earn trust and caused her to miss out on opportunities, lagging behind her male counterparts. I was livid that someone as diligent as her faced discrimination solely based on her gender. Yet I also felt a pang of disappointment that she didn't confide in me about these issues. It made me question whether she saw me as a dependable confidant. Then, one day, I noticed a sudden change in her demeanor. From then on, she became more devoted to her studies and training. Whenever she had spare time, she'd be at a nearby cafe, buried in her textbooks until closing time. I admired her stoic attitude and respected her for it. However, as the time we spent together dwindled, I began to feel lonely. The reason why she studied outside was that she couldn't concentrate at home. I understood her reasoning, yet it made me feel somewhat like a nuisance, which annoyed me a bit. Gradually, our feelings for each other became misaligned, and eventually, I suggested maybe it's better if we go our separate ways. She solemnly agreed with that. Finally, we divorced. However, over these 10 years, Emily and I weren't completely out of touch. Since our workplaces were close, we occasionally ran into each other downtown or in our neighborhood. "How's work going lately?" "Well, not bad. I've slowly started to perform surgeries myself." "Wow, that's impressive." Since our divorce was amicable, we would stop and chat whenever we met. Yet, about 3 years after our divorce, I transferred to a different hospital. I made sure to inform her about it over the phone. "Good luck. I'll be doing my best too. Hopefully, we'll both be successful in the future." "You'll definitely make it. See you." With that, I ended the call. Later, while working at the new hospital, I met a woman named Karen. She was my patient, and we fell in love and eventually got remarried. This time, I'm determined to make it work. I thought I started a new chapter in my life. I wondered whether I should tell Emily about that. We were even strangers, so I was under no obligation. But as a casual update, I decided to give her a call. "Hey, it's been a long time. What's up?" Emily sounded genuinely happy to hear from me. We made light conversation, and it seemed she had been recognized as a potential ace at the hospital, thanks to all her hard work. "Despite being a woman, I've seen how hard you've worked, Emily. I always believed you could do it. Really hearing you say that means a lot to me. Thanks, David." Hearing my name after so long brought back memories, but I'd started down a different path. Actually, I'm getting married. For a moment, it felt like time stood still for her. However, she quickly responded with, "Oh, really? Wow, congratulations," making me think maybe I was just imagining things. "Wait, is that what you called to tell me? You don't have to worry about me. You're not planning on inviting me to the wedding, are you?" "No, that would be too much." "Just kidding." "Okay, having said what I needed to, well, that's all I wanted to say." "Okay, thanks for letting me know, David. I hope you're happy with that." She hung up. It's been over 5 years since I've had any contact with her. That call was our last conversation. When I arrived at Emily's viewing, I was surprised by the sheer number of people coming and going. I saw Emily's cousin and greeted him. "Hi, David. Long time no see. You look well." "His name is Alex." He was the one who informed me of Emily's passing. You seem well too, but this is quite a crowd. Most of them are from the hospital where Emily worked. Work? Many patients came as well. Patients too. Yes. So many people were saved by her surgeries. I can't believe someone so amazing was part of our family. I'm really proud. Alex's tears made me feel a lump in my throat. Emily had lived up to her word, wanting to save many people. It's clear she was respected and acknowledged for her efforts as a surgeon by so many. But I wished Emily had taken better care of herself too. It must have been tough fighting the disease for over 6 years. I turned to Alex in surprise. 6 years? The last time I spoke to Emily was 5 years ago. That means she was already battling breast cancer then. Why didn't she tell me? I felt a rush of anger towards her, but I caught myself quickly. At that time, I called to tell her about my upcoming marriage. Perhaps she thought that telling her ex-husband about her cancer would only burden me as I was starting a new chapter. In a way, by announcing my marriage, I distanced myself from her while she faced her fears alone. What a cruel thing I have done. As I offered a flower at her altar, I apologized, regretting my actions. That day, I'm sorry, Emily, for not realizing sooner. I gave a slight nod to her parents, who were still in tears, struggling to come to terms with their loss. Emily was a great person who saved many lives, but to them, she was their irreplaceable daughter. They must have never wanted to witness her passing. The thought made my heart ache. That's when it happened. David, do you have a moment right now? Alex tapped me on the shoulder. Yes, sure. What's up? Actually, there's someone who wants to meet you. Could you come with me? Someone wants to meet me. Who is it? He gestured towards a man. The gentleman right there. He's Emily's current husband. Hearing that, I was taken aback. Her husband faced me and greeted politely, saying, "Pleased to meet you. I'm Raymond." He seemed significantly older. From our conversation, I learned he was the deputy director at the hospital where Emily worked. So she had remarried a highly experienced doctor. However, as her ex-husband, meeting Raymond in that context felt oddly uncomfortable. I'm sorry to take your time. Actually, I have something important I'd like to discuss with you. Raymond and Emily had been planning to open their own hospital. I remember her once saying, "I'd love to build a hospital someday, though I know it's a long shot." I never imagined they were close to making that dream a reality. Her determination never ceased to amaze me. We married 2 years ago. Despite her battle with cancer, she continued to perform surgeries, facing each patient with dedication. I was drawn to her relentless spirit. I knew her prognosis wasn't good, but I wanted to marry her, hoping for the best. Even as a doctor, we wanted to open our hospital together. Raymond wiped away his tears with a handkerchief. He expressed regret that they were so close to realizing their dream, yet it remained unfulfilled. Though Emily has passed, I want to carry on her will, open the hospital, and continue helping many patients, just as she did. His gaze was as steadfast as Emily's had been. Now, to the matter at hand. We had planned to include a facility to support disabled individuals within the hospital. Support for the disabled too. So, you'll eventually need physical therapists. Exactly. And about the physical therapist position, I was hoping you would consider joining us. Me? I was utterly surprised by the unexpected offer. But he mentioned that Emily had recommended me for the role when they first discussed opening the hospital. Why would Emily recommend me? He smiled. She always spoke highly of you, praising your ability to empathize with patients and motivate them with your words. She even said that one of the reasons she persevered as a surgeon was due to your encouragement. I must admit, her smile when she spoke of you even made me a bit jealous. She said that about me. Then something even more surprising came up. It's possible that she still had feelings for you. What? She never mentioned anything like that in front of me, but there were moments when she seemed to be lost in thought, as if she was conversing with memories deep within her. I believe those were moments with you. Raymond's words made me recall my last conversation with her. Indeed, there was an awkward pause when I informed her of my marriage. To think she still had feelings for me was a shock. I never stopped caring about Emily either. Even when I proposed our divorce, I still loved her. But that love was precisely why we had to part ways. She had a profound conviction, the conviction to save lives as a doctor. I didn't want to stand in the way of that. As a fledgling physical therapist, I had my convictions too. I thought I had no regrets about our decision, yet tears now freely flowed down my cheeks. Raymond gently placed his hand on my shoulder. Emily might have been saddened by our separation, but she never regretted her path as a doctor. Instead, she was grateful for your support, which enabled her to strive forward. I loved her, including the moments she shared with you. I'm sorry I'm speculating. She always hid the most important things after all. I responded with a laugh. Really? He assured me there was still time to think it over before parting ways. When I discussed that with my current wife, Karen, she seemed to see right through me. You want to work there, don't you? You've talked about Emily so often. Feeling guilty for my insensitivity, I started to apologize, but she smiled. It's okay. It's not about holding on to the past. You always spoke of Emily with such respect. I understand. Raymond's feelings. Normally, one might be hesitant to work with their spouse's ex, but Raymond accepted her suggestion willingly. She must have respected you deeply, believing you were the right person for this. Your relationship with Emily goes beyond just being ex-spouses, and both Raymond and I believe that. So, follow your heart. Closing my eyes, I reflected on Karen's words. Emily was indeed someone very special to me. It's true. I'm grateful to both Raymond and Karen for understanding that. Years later, I find myself working as a physical therapist at the facility Raymond built in Emily's memory. The hospital is equipped with the latest technology to ensure comprehensive care for cancer patients. It can be called a testament to Emily's legacy. I'm committed to carrying on her will, aspiring to help as many people as she had hoped to. Hey there, I'm Kelly, and I'm 22 years old. I've been lucky to grow up in a family filled with love, and I had a special connection with my mom. Unfortunately, when I was just 11 years old, my mom was diagnosed with cancer, and she passed away 3 years later. She left behind her clothes, some precious family heirloom jewelry, and a fund for my college education. However, nothing could fill the void her absence left in my life. Losing her was devastating, and it deeply impacted both my dad, Jeff, and me. My mom's passing strained the relationship between my dad and me. We struggled to communicate and slowly drifted apart, feeling like we had both lost a crucial anchor in our lives. Then, about a year and a half later, my dad introduced me to Martha, the woman he was seeing. Although I thought it might be too soon, seeing my dad happy gave me some comfort, so I supported him. They tied the knot 7 months later. Martha was kind, and I genuinely wanted my dad to be happy. But I couldn't quite connect with her. I understood that she could never replace my mom. I made it clear to my dad that I respected her as his wife, but I couldn't see her as my mother. I hoped he would convey my feelings to Martha. Unfortunately, it seemed either he hadn't or Martha chose to ignore his words. Soon after they got married, she began imposing her beliefs and values on me. Whenever I resisted, she complained to my dad, who, seeking peace, asked us to resolve our issues on our own. One major point of contention was her insistence that I stop reading my favorite book series, deeming it childish. Despite her pressure, I stood firm, explaining how much joy those books brought me. Our disagreements only magnified the tension between us, especially when Martha expected me to treat her like a mother, a role I firmly believed she couldn't fulfill. I made it crystal clear to her. I see you solely as my dad's wife, nothing more. Understand that you can't replace my mother, and I won't be forced to call you mom. Ignoring my protests, she insisted I call her mom and, to enforce it, confiscated my beloved books. Frustrated, I threatened to tell my dad, curious about whose side he'd take, his wife's or his daughter's. But she just smirked and walked off with my books. When I reached out to my dad for help, he dismissed my concerns, claiming he was too exhausted from work to mediate between Martha and me. He suggested I handle it alone. That stung. It was then I realized where his priorities lay: his job, his new wife, his ideal home. Everything else seemed to take precedence over his relationship with me. However, he'd never taken my side or even attempted to mediate a fair discussion with Martha, so I decided to keep a low profile. The constant rebellion wasn't changing anything, and I realized that the best thing for me would be to move out. As soon as I hit 19, I knew Dad wouldn't mind, and Martha's opinions were irrelevant to me. For the next year, I barely spoke up or responded to Martha's provocations, even when she tried to parade me as her daughter in front of her friends or demanded I call her mom in their presence, leading to inevitable arguments afterward. Yet, I remained indifferent. Perhaps Dad was trying to respect my one request by not forcing the issue, or maybe he just couldn't be bothered. Martha's frustration with me only grew, her disdain palpable. But as soon as I turned 19, I was ready to leave. My mom had left me enough money to get through college comfortably, and I had secured a scholarship. Moving out was my escape, my chance to start fresh without the constant tension and babbles at home. Leaving home happened so suddenly that it caught both my dad and Martha by surprise. Not long after I settled into my new place, Martha called upset and questioned how I could just leave like that. "I'm 19, I reminded her, highlighting that at my age, it's normal for people to move out and start living independently. She complained about how upset they were, to which I pointed out that she had always urged me to act like my peers who were also moving out at this stage of their lives. When she tried to guilt-trip me by saying my dad was sad and worried because of my departure, I suggested that if that were true, he could reach out to me directly. Martha then insisted on her role in my life, claiming a right to know why I left so abruptly. I had to make it clear to her she was not my mother, and her attempts to control my life were the reason for my departure. Despite her denials, it was evident to me that Martha's efforts to dictate my actions were unwavering. After hanging up on Martha, I felt a profound sense of freedom. For the first time, I could make choices about simple things like what to wear or what to eat without criticism. I relished the liberty to go out without having to plan days ahead. My newfound independence allowed me to enjoy simple pleasures like going bowling, a pastime Martha had absurdly labeled as too provocative. In the following years, my communication with Dad and Martha was minimal. If they really cared, I figured they would make an effort to reach out. Time flew by, and during my college years, I thrived academically and became well known on campus. Conversations with my dad became monthly check-ins, during which he mentioned that Martha had nearly stopped bringing me up. Yet, on the occasions my name did come up, it seemed to stir some reaction. Martha's reaction to any mention of me hadn't changed much. She'd quickly become upset and shift the conversation. However, my dad started to initiate more calls, perhaps finding some solace in our conversations amidst Martha's constant antics. It felt like the distance between us had somewhat bridged the gap, making our relationship a bit closer. One day, Dad called unexpectedly. The conversation quickly turned to how I was managing my studies and his casual update on Martha's latest mood swings. He mentioned a call from Uncle Tyler, a relative we hadn't heard from in a while, who was planning his 53rd birthday celebration and wanted us there. Excited at the prospect of reuniting with Uncle Tyler, I was initially hesitant when Dad suggested I stay with them. My reluctance stemmed from past experiences where Dad had failed to support me against Martha's behaviors. Sensing my hesitation, Dad earnestly asked me to give it another chance, revealing he'd been attending therapy to become a better father. This admission took me by surprise and sparked a glimmer of hope that things might be different this time. He promised to stand by me if any issues arose with Martha, a pledge he had never made before. Encouraged by his commitment and the noticeable change in his approach, I agreed to stay with them during Uncle Tyler's birthday celebration, though I remained cautious, not fully convinced yet willing to see if Dad's promises would hold true. I found myself genuinely looking forward to the visit. This would be a chance to not only reconnect with my family, but also to see if the newfound dynamics between Dad and me could truly make a difference. Although the prospect of being around Martha wasn't appealing to me, the excitement of seeing Uncle Tyler again overshadowed it. Uncle Tyler, my mom's older brother, held a special place in our hearts. He stepped in to raise my mom after their parents passed away. And when I was born, he was incredibly loving, showering me with affection and gifts. However, life's responsibilities, including joining the police academy and starting his own family, along with the profound impact of my mom's passing, led him to distance himself for a while. We hardly knew of his well-being except for occasional updates from his wife. Then, when my dad remarried and Martha entered our lives, she insisted we sever ties with my mom's side of the family. At that point, our connection with them was already minimal, so distancing further wasn't difficult. I suspected Martha would be displeased about us rekindling ties with my mom's family, and probably even more so about us visiting them. But it didn't matter to me. I was just thrilled to see my dad stand up to her for once. After my midterms, I returned home, bringing along one of my mom's dresses and some of her jewelry to wear at Uncle Tyler's birthday. It felt like a way to have her presence there with us. My dad picked me up from the airport, mentioning that Martha was out for the day, which meant we had some quality time to ourselves before the celebration. Our visit to Uncle Tyler's was emotional, given the long time apart, but thankfully Martha wasn't there to dampen the mood. The evening was wonderful, filled with stories about my mom and her family. I learned that Uncle Tyler had been promoted to sergeant at his precinct, a fact that filled me with pride. I shared tales of my college life, and we all enjoyed a good laugh together. Returning home past midnight, Martha was waiting up for us, visibly displeased by our long absence. Yet my dad simply told her to relax, explaining we had spent time with family we hadn't seen in years. It was a moment that showed how much we valued reconnecting with our roots, regardless of the tension it might have caused with Martha. Upon returning from our visit to Uncle Tyler's, Martha confronted us with a mix of accusation and resentment, questioning the newfound connection with my mom's family. I tried explaining that it's possible to belong to more than one family. While the thought of being around Martha wasn't appealing to me, the excitement of seeing Uncle Tyler again overshadowed any reservations. Uncle Tyler, my mom's older brother, held a special place in our hearts. He stepped in to raise my mom after their parents passed away, and from the moment I was born, he showered me with affection and gifts. Life's responsibilities, including joining the police academy and starting his own family, along with the profound impact of my mom's passing, led Uncle Tyler to distance himself for a while. We hardly knew of his well-being except for occasional updates from his wife. Then, when my dad remarried and Martha entered our lives, she insisted we sever ties with my mom's side of the family. At that point, our connection with them was already minimal, so further distancing wasn't difficult. I suspected Martha would be displeased about us rekindling ties with my mom's family, and probably even more so about us visiting them. That it didn't matter to me. I was just thrilled to see my dad stand up to her for once. After my midterms, I returned home, bringing along one of my mom's dresses and some of her jewelry to wear at Uncle Tyler's birthday. It felt like a way to have her presence there with us. My dad picked me up from the airport, mentioning that Martha was out for the day, which meant we had some quality time to ourselves before the celebration. Our visit to Uncle Tyler's was emotional given the long time apart, but thankfully Martha wasn't there to dampen the mood. The evening was wonderful, filled with stories about my mom and her family. I learned that Uncle Tyler had been promoted to sergeant at his precinct, a fact that filled me with pride. I shared tales of my college life, and we all enjoyed a good laugh together. Returning home past midnight, Martha was waiting up for us, visibly displeased by our long absence. Yet my dad simply told her to relax, explaining we had spent time with family we hadn't seen in years. It was a moment that showed how much we valued reconnecting with our roots, regardless of the tension it might have caused with Martha. Upon returning from our visit to Uncle Tyler's, Martha confronted us with a mix of accusation and resentment, questioning the newfound connection with my mom's family. I tried explaining that it's possible to belong to more than one family. We're heading to my parents' house again this year, James announces, and I can't help but let out a sigh. We agreed to alternate between our parents' homes, remember? I remind him, recalling the promise we made before tying the knot. If we go to your parents', it'll be stressful. I want to relax during the New Year celebration. James grimaces at my resentful look. How about this year you go to your parents alone, and Ava and I go to mine? I suggest, but James shakes his head. That's not going to work. The whole point of going is to be dutiful children. If you're not there, it defeats the purpose. You mean you need a housekeeper, don't you? I swallow those words, not wanting to create a hostile atmosphere in front of Ava. I'm Sophia, a working mom married to James for 4 years. We have a 3-year-old daughter named Ava, a late talker but adorable. Whenever we visit my in-laws, I'm the one stuck doing all the housework. James is usually out with his friends, not around to help. To make matters worse, Emma's family, who live nearby, always seem to visit at the same time. Even though they live nearby, they stay overnight, probably to dump the housework and childcare on me. Emma got married young and has 4 kids, all boys. The older 2 are in elementary school, and the younger ones are in daycare, with one still a baby. Neither Emma nor Angela lifts a finger when I'm around, so I'm running around all day doing chores. Why do I have to sacrifice my time so everyone else can enjoy their New Year celebration? I've actually been thinking about divorcing James, and I've had everything ready. The tipping point was a summer vacation 2 years ago. James left in the afternoon and didn't come back until late at night, leaving me worried. I wonder what happened, I muttered, and a tipsy Emma let it slip. He probably fell asleep. He's at Sarah's place, so he's fine. Emma confessed after I pressed her. According to her, Sarah is an old high school girlfriend, but they're just friends now. But to me, that doesn't sound like a just friends situation. At the time, our daughter was only 1, and the thought of becoming a single mom was daunting. So I hesitated before taking the divorce step. But each time we visit my in-laws and James goes out with his friends, it becomes unbearable. Eventually, I hired a private investigator and gathered evidence of his infidelity. With the evidence in hand, I consulted a lawyer and explained the situation to my parents, planning to move closer to them after the divorce. Diligently, I began preparing for the transition, searching for a new place to live, job opportunities, and childcare for Ava. This visit to my in-laws would likely be the last. That's what I was thinking as we arrived on the day of our departure. Due to work commitments, we'd out there on the 31st, navigating through jam-packed highways. As soon as we arrived, Angela wasted no time. "Could you make lunch right away?" she demanded. Still holding our travel bags, frozen in place, I heard her directive. "Just make something simple," she added before swiftly retreating to the living room. I was prepared for this, but it still stung. I stowed our bags in a corner of the living room, turned on a device, and donned my apron. I should have turned it on sooner, I thought to myself as I quickly prepared a variety of dishes. But just as I was about to sit down to eat, Emma whisked my plate away. "I'm breastfeeding, so I need to eat a lot. I'll take Sophia's portion too," she declared, and before I knew it, all the food I prepared was gone. But that was my portion. When people are too shocked, words often fail them. I could barely muster a complaint. James, who had finished eating, chimed in. "Sophia, it's fine to skip a meal once in a while," siding with Emma. She quickly started eating my portion, adding, "Exactly. Oh, the baby's crying. Can you hold him?" she said, pointing at the baby while chewing her food. Meanwhile, Angela urged, "Come on, Sophia, hold the baby." My in-laws were watching TV, sipping coffee, and James was lounging around. I hadn't sat down since we arrived. As I walked around holding the fussy, sleepy baby, David yelled, "I can't hear the TV. Take the baby outside until he falls asleep." Finally, when the baby did fall asleep, Angela summoned me to wash the dishes and then go shopping. The catch? We have to pay for everything, and they even request high-end ingredients and pantry staples. With all these adults around, no one helped clean up. I've been treated more and more like a housekeeper each year, and I couldn't help but give a dry laugh. That's when Emma dropped a bombshell. Great, we've eaten, so we're going to the countdown. Take care of the 4 kids, will you? As Emma was about to head out, I hurriedly stopped her. Wait, you mean the New Year's countdown? You're leaving now? It was just past 2:00 p.m. Yeah, the venue is a bit far, and we don't want to lose a parking spot. Plus, we don't want the kids to find out, she explained. No wonder Maddie, who had been fiddling with his phone, was gone. Emma and her husband wanted to go out without the kids. I have to go shopping. Please wait until I get back, I pleaded. The moms are here, so it's fine. Emma reassured me. Just when I thought it might be okay, Angela said something outrageous. Oh, David and I are invited to a neighbor's place. David already left, and I'm leaving soon, so Sophia, please do a thorough cleaning before we get back. Even my in-laws were leaving me stunned. I didn't know what to say. But Emma suggested, why don't you take the kids shopping? I was shocked and replied, my car can't fit 5 kids, and we don't even have enough car seats. Just have the older ones hold the younger ones. That's what we always do, she said casually. It struck me then. Their car was also a 5-seater. Could it be they don't use car seats? I was too scared to ask. Or you could leave the baby since he's asleep. If you hurry, he'll be fine, Emma added. I can't leave a baby alone, and I have multiple stops to make, I protested. As I insisted, Angela became furious. Come on, Sophia, stop complaining. Emma is usually tired from taking care of the kids. Let her relax for once, she retorted. Then, Angela, please stay and watch the kids, I countered. I can't. I've already made plans with the neighbors, and my knee hurts, so I can't take care of the kids. Angela easily deflected, even when I pushed back. Then James stepped in, wearing a coat as if he's going somewhere. Hey, Emma, can you ask Sophia for a favor? He requested, but it seemed impossible. James, can you at least watch them while I go shopping? I'm going with them, so I can't, Emma replied. My mind went blank at James's words. What was decided from the start that the 3 of them are going? What about Ava and me and Emma's kids? As I fired off questions, James got annoyed. Stop nagging. Just do the housework, Sophia. That's what a daughter-in-law is supposed to do, he said dismissively. I was about to explode with anger. Maybe I'd been too patient all this time. Just as I was about to yell, Emma's kids, Michael and Thomas, came in. Are the moms going somewhere? We want to go too. It's not fair. Let's all go, they protested. They must have figured out their parents were going somewhere and started making a fuss. Good, keep it up, I muttered to myself. The kids continued. Why don't we all go? I suggested with a smile. James and the others exchanged glances, but then James slipped up in frustration. No, it's supposed to be a double date, he admitted. A date? I couldn't help but ask. Wait, you idiot. Emma hurriedly smacked James on the head, but it was too late. A double date? I'm James's wife. Do you know who James's date is? Is it that Sarah person? My voice dropped in the room, and the room fell silent, even the kids. Perhaps shocked, James becomes defiant. So what if I have female friends? Are you saying you won't allow me to have friends of the opposite sex now that we're married? He retorts. Don't change the subject, Emma. You knew about this, didn't you? I ask in a low voice. Angela and Emma exchange glances. Angela murmurs, I found out because James told me. He can't come back here because he can't have a successor, and she's against living together with him. In that case, wouldn't it be better to remarry someone you know from the local area? She continues. So you're all condoning this affair. For the record, it's James who doesn't want to move back because it's more convenient in the city. Don't blame me, I snap. Something inside me snaps. The kids quietly slip away, leaving Angela, Emma, James, and me. I was about to spill everything when Angela clasps her hands, signaling the end of the discussion. Let's stop this. It's New Year's. Let's enjoy it as planned, Angela says before leaving with Emma. Sophia, let's just drop it, okay? I'm really looking forward to the countdown event and want to get going. Emma tries to leave as if nothing happened, but I won't let her. Emma, either take the kids with you or cancel your plans. I absolutely can't and won't take care of them. I made myself clear, I assert. Angela bursts in anger. What are you saying? You and Emma are different. You're just a daughter-in-law, while Emma is blood family. Let her enjoy the New Year's celebration. So the truth comes out. I suspected this was how they saw me, but hearing it directly is something else. So you're saying I'm an outsider? Of course, you're just a daughter-in-law. You're not family. Angela repeats herself when I ask for clarification. Then I'll go to my parents' house. If Angela sees me as a stranger, then Emma is too. I can't take responsibility for someone else's kids, I state firmly. Angela is at a loss for words, caught off guard. Hey, Sophia, what are you saying to Mom? James yells. But it's so off the mark it's infuriating. James, aren't you bothered by what Mom said? She called me an outsider, I retort. Well, you are a daughter-in-law. Unbelievable. What about Ava? Ava is my daughter, my blood family. So even though Ava is your blood family and I'm her mother, I'm not family? What am I then? Your housekeeper. I say, hitting the nail on the head. Hey, watch your language. James interjects. No, I hit the nail on the head, but your housekeeper is resigning. I'm filing for divorce and will be seeking alimony from both you and your affair partner, Sarah. I declare boldly. Saying the word divorce feels liberating. James is shocked, yelling, Why divorce all of a sudden? Emma adds, Don't talk about divorce over something like this. It's New Year's Eve. Stop joking. Angela doesn't seem to think I'm serious. Just then, Ava comes in and quietly says, Let's go, Mom. She tries to pull me outside. She was quietly playing in the living room earlier, but it seems she's worried about me after hearing our argument. That settles it for me. I pick up Ava. Let's go to Mommy's house, I say, and Ava hugs me tightly. Fortunately, our bags are still unpacked, sitting in a corner of the living room. I grab one. Wait, if you don't watch the kids, we can't go to the countdown event. We were really looking forward to it. Emma persists, pushing her agenda. I'm a stranger, remember. I'm going back to my family now. But that's inconvenient for me. We've already booked expensive seats for the event, thinking you'd watch the kids. It's too late to cancel now. If you're going to divorce, do it after the New Year celebration, Emma, I reply calmly. Are you saying the event is more important than my divorce? James looks dumbfounded, which I find oddly amusing. James, take the train back, I say, dropping the line and grabbing the car keys. We'll discuss the details of the divorce through lawyers. Oh, and by the way, I've recorded our entire conversation, I add, pulling out a voice recorder from my pocket. Family-wide cheating and emotional abuse. This will make excellent evidence, I say with a grin. What do you mean recording? Emma, Angela, and James look stunned, their faces blank. Before the New Year's countdown, the countdown to divorce was already ticking. I think I had the best smile ever, leaving behind my in-laws, who turned pale upon grasping the situation. Ava and I get into the car. I hear a chorus of apologies and curses behind me, but they quickly fade away. After driving for a while, I pull over at a convenience store and call my parents. They're shocked by the news, but furious with my in-laws once they hear the story. Come right away, they say. What happened next? James and I got divorced. I had prepared well, so it was straightforward. I planned to get custody of Ava, and James quickly agreed. He probably planned to remarry his affair partner. However, she dumped him, saying she didn't want to be treated like a housekeeper in his home. She knew how I had been treated for years, and coupled with the alimony I claimed, probably wanted to cut ties. After that day, it seems the neighbors heard Angela, Emma, and James yelling and started rumors that it was a terrible household for a daughter-in-law. James called me, begging to get back together, but I flatly refused. Serves him right. Angela, meanwhile, ended up with a slipped disc after Emma begged her to take care of the kids in my absence. David had to do household chores. He's not good at making the atmosphere at home tense. Emma and her husband got caught by the police for not having their children in car seats. It was right after the countdown event, and they were under the influence. Making matters worse, the neighborhood is buzzing with stories about the family's mistreatment of me and Emma's run-in with the law, making life uncomfortable for my former in-laws, all their own doing. As for me, life after divorce is going smoothly, partly because I had prepared in advance. I was worried about the impact of the divorce on Ava, but we're enjoying calmer days than I expected. Ava is smiling and talking more than before. Everything is moving in a positive direction, and I'm relieved. I want to protect Ava's smiles and spend each day doing just that. In the serene suburbs of a quaint small town, amidst rows of nearly identical houses, stood the residence where I, Olivia, spent my formative years. It was a modest two-story abode with a garden that had seen better days and the mailbox that leaned slightly to the side, as if weary of standing upright. Memories flooded back to me of the days when Mom still graced us with her presence, infusing our home with laughter and warmth. But after her passing, everything shifted. My father, a respected doctor, immersed himself in his work, leaving my elder sister Emily and me to grapple with our grief in solitude. Emily, 3 years my senior, appeared to cope better, or perhaps she just concealed her pain more effectively. Whenever Dad was present, his attention was invariably fixed on Emily, her academic prowess making her the epitome of his pride and joy. Meanwhile, I often felt like a mere shadow in our household, overlooked and insignificant. One evening, during a rare occasion when Dad was home early, the contrast in his treatment towards us was glaring. "Emily, I heard from your teacher today," he began, a genuine smile adorning his face for the first time in what felt like ages. "She says you're at the top of your class in biology. I'm so proud of you. You're truly my daughter." Emily's cheeks flushed with pride as she thanked him, basking in his praise. Meanwhile, I fidgeted with my food, grappling with the familiar pang of exclusion. "I got an A in English," I murmured, more to my plate than to anyone else. Dad's smile waned as he turned towards me. "English? What use is that, Olivia? Why can't you be more like your sister? She's going to be a great doctor one day." His words hung heavy in the air, suffocating me with shame and embarrassment. It wasn't just disappointment. It was as if he couldn't comprehend why I couldn't mold myself into someone else, someone more akin to Emily. After dinner, I sought solace in my room, the only place where I felt a semblance of peace. Through the walls, I could hear Emily and Dad sharing laughter in the living room, further highlighting my sense of alienation. That night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't shake the nagging question. Why couldn't Dad see me for who I was? Why was I always relegated to the shadows? Thus began my journey of self-discovery and independence, amidst the backdrop of high school, a time when most teenagers were navigating their way through friendships and the awkward journey to adulthood. For me, it was a period marked by an intensifying feeling of invisibility within my own family. As we grew older, Emily's accomplishments became more pronounced, especially in our father's eyes. She wasn't just excelling academically, she also displayed a keen interest in following Dad's footsteps into medicine. This only seemed to widen the chasm between Dad and me. One evening during my sophomore year, Emily burst through the door, brimming with excitement. Dad was engrossed in a stack of medical journals in the living room, while I sought refuge in a corner with a book, an escape from my reality. "Guess what, Dad?" Emily exclaimed, her eyes sparkling. Dad looked up, pride evident in his gaze. "That's wonderful, Emily. I knew you had it in you. You're going to make an excellent doctor one day." From my corner, I observed, feeling a mix of pride for Emily and a sinking feeling in my stomach. I knew what was coming next. "And what about you, Olivia? What have you done lately?" Dad's words pierced through me, and I closed my book, my heart racing. Dad shook his head, barely concealing his disdain. "Literature, that's a hobby, Olivia, not a career. Why don't you try to be more like your sister?" The words stung, as they always did. I glanced down at my book, tears threatening to spill. Emily shot me a sympathetic look, but she was swiftly drawn back into conversation with Dad about her achievements. That night, as I lay in bed, a growing resentment simmered within me. It wasn't just towards Dad for his blatant favoritism, but also towards Emily. It wasn't her fault, but she embodied everything I was not and everything Dad wanted me to be. As days turned into months, this pattern persisted. It wasn't that I lacked my own successes. I excelled in school, and my literature club made a real impact in the community. But in Dad's eyes, these achievements paled in comparison to the allure of a career in medicine. One afternoon, as I sat in the library, engrossed in a literature club project, a sudden realization struck me like a bolt of lightning. I didn't need my father's approval to take pride in my achievements. I was forging my own path, one distinct from Emily's, yet equally significant. This newfound understanding didn't erase the ache for my father's acceptance, but it did provide me with a sense of purpose. I wasn't just Emily's shadow. I was Olivia, with my own dreams and aspirations worth cherishing. College became a breath of fresh air for me, a chance to step out from beneath Emily's shadow and my father's expectations. Opting for a college far enough away to foster independence, yet close enough for occasional visits home, I embraced this opportunity. In my second year, I stumbled upon a field that ignited a genuine passion within me, dentistry. It was during a health sciences elective that I realized my fascination with the intricacies of dental care and its profound impact on overall health. One afternoon, deeply immersed in a text about dental anatomy, my friend Clara approached me. Clara had always felt more like a sister to me than Emily ever did. "Hey, Olivia, what's got you so captivated?" she inquired, peering over my shoulder. I looked up, a smile spreading across my face. "It's this dentistry course. I never realized how complex and fascinating it is. It's like solving a puzzle, understanding each part of the oral cavity and its impact on health." "Dentistry? Huh? That's pretty cool." "You always did like solving puzzles?" Clara remarked, raising an eyebrow. Our conversation was interrupted by a call from my father. My heart sank a little, anticipating the usual disappointment in his tone. "Olivia, your sister just got accepted into med school. What are you doing with your life? Have you given any more thought to pursuing a real career like medicine?" Taking a deep breath, I summoned newfound confidence. "Actually, Dad, I found something I'm really passionate about. I'm thinking of going into dentistry." There was a pause on the other end of the line, followed by his disapproving response. "Dentistry? That's not a real doctor, Olivia. Why must you always choose the easy way out?" His words stung, but I remained resolute. "It's not the easy way out, Dad. It's what I'm interested in. It's what I want to do." His sigh spoke volumes of resignation rather than understanding. "Well, it's your life. Just don't come running to me when you realize you've made a mistake," he retorted before hanging up. Clara placed a comforting hand on my shoulder. "Don't listen to him, Olivia. You've got to do what's right for you, not what's right for him." That conversation marked a turning point for me, a moment of clarity where I embraced the realization that I didn't have to conform to my father's expectations. From that moment on, I immersed myself in my studies with renewed vigor, determined to excel in a field that truly spoke to my passion. I had chosen for myself. I spent the rest of my college years balancing academics with practical experiences in dental clinics. The more I learned, the more convinced I became that I had made the right choice. It was a world away from the life my father had envisioned for me, but it was my life. And I was determined to live it on my own terms. As college came to an end, I felt a mix of excitement and apprehension about the future. Stepping into the unknown was daunting, but for the first time, it was a path I had chosen for myself, and that made all the difference. After college, I, Olivia, embarked on the challenging journey of establishing my career in dentistry. The path was fraught with obstacles, but each hurdle only strengthened my resolve. I worked tirelessly, often juggling multiple roles as an intern, a researcher, and a part-time clinician. A few years into my career, my hard work began to pay off. I was offered a partnership at a well-established dental clinic in the city. It was a dream come true. a testament to my dedication and skill. Yet this triumph was mine alone. I hadn't shared my progress with my father or Emily. I feared their reaction, or worse, their indifference. One evening, as I celebrated this milestone with close friends at a cozy restaurant downtown, amidst laughter and congratulations, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Emily, a rare occurrence. "Hey Olivia, Dad's asking about what you're doing these days. He's curious if you ever made anything of yourself. What should I tell him?" I stared at the screen, feeling a familiar sting of old wounds surfacing. I typed out a reply, keeping it vague. "Tell them I'm doing fine, just working." As I put my phone away, my friend Mark noticed my change in demeanor. "Everything okay, Olivia?" I forced a smile. "Yeah, it's just family stuff, you know how it is." Mark nodded understandingly. "You've done amazing things, Olivia. Don't let anyone, not even family, make you feel otherwise." His words were comforting, but they couldn't erase the years of feeling overshadowed and undervalued by my family. The following week, I found myself in an upscale dental conference, rubbing shoulders with some of the best in the field. I was presenting a paper I had co-authored on innovative dental prosthetics, a significant achievement in my career. As I walked off the stage to a round of applause, my phone rang. "Olivia, Emily told me you're just working. Why don't you take your career seriously? You know it's not too late to consider medical school." Dad's voice rang out, pulling me back to reality, especially after the high of my successful presentation. "Dad, I am serious about my career. I'm actually doing very well in dentistry," I responded, trying to keep my tone steady despite the familiar sting of his words. There was a pause on the other end. "And then dentistry? That's not a real career. You could have been a doctor like your sister." The words hit hard, but I found strength in my achievements. "Dentistry is a real career, Dad, and I'm good at it. I wish you could see that." He didn't respond, and the line went dead. I stood there, phone in hand, feeling a mix of anger and sadness. It was clear that no matter what I achieved, it would never be enough for him. That night, as I lay in bed, I reflected on my journey. I had built a successful career, one that I was proud of, but I had done it without the support of my family. It was a bittersweet realization. I decided then to focus on my achievements and the life I had built for myself, rather than seeking validation from those who could not see my worth. The chapter of my unspoken success was just that, mine and unspoken. But it was filled with accomplishments that spoke volumes about who I was and what I was capable of, even if my father couldn't see it. Years had passed since I, Olivia, had chosen to carve my own path in dentistry, leaving behind my father's expectations and the shadow of my sister, Emily. My career had flourished, yet the chasm between my family and me had only widened. Communication was sparse, often limited to brief formal exchanges during holidays or obligatory family gatherings. One such occasion arose, a family dinner at Dad's house, a rare event meant to celebrate Emily's latest achievement in her medical career. I arrived with a mix of reluctance and a faint hope for some semblance of familial connection. The evening began with polite small talk, the kind that skirts around the edges of deeper conversations. Emily shared stories of her residency at a prestigious hospital, each tale met with Dad's beaming pride. Then, as we settled into the main course, Dad turned his attention to me, his tone tinged with familiar criticism. "So, Olivia, it's been a while since we've heard about your career. How is your little dental practice going?" The room grew tense, and Emily glanced at me, a silent plea for peace in her eyes. I took a deep breath, choosing my words carefully. "It's going well, Dad? The practice is growing, and we're making a real difference in people's lives," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. Dad scoffed, his words sharp and cutting. "A real difference? You could have been making a real difference as a doctor like your sister. Instead, you chose this lesser path." The old wound, always simmering just beneath the surface, began to throb. "Dentistry is not a lesser path, Dad. It's a vital part of healthcare. I've worked hard to build my practice, and I'm proud of what I've achieved." Dad's expression hardened. Proud? You turned your back on a noble profession for teeth. You've always been the disappointment, Olivia. I just hoped you'd come to your senses. Eventually, Emily interjected, her voice a mix of concern and frustration. Dad, that's enough. Olivia's done well for herself. But Dad was unrelenting. No, Emily, she needs to hear this. She's dishonored our family, and I can't pretend to be proud of her choices. His words struck like a physical blow. I felt a rush of emotions, anger, hurt, and a deep-seated frustration. Standing up, my chair scraping loudly against the floor, I faced him. Dishonored the family because I chose a different career. No, Dad. The only dishonor here is your inability to see and respect your own daughter's choices, I retorted, my voice firm. The room fell silent. Dad's face reddened, his anger palpable. If you can't respect my wishes, then you can leave my house. I won't have such disrespect at my table. Without a word, I turned and left, the sound of my footsteps echoing in the tense air. Emily called out, but I didn't stop. The finality of the moment hung heavily around me. Outside, under the cold night sky, I felt a mixture of liberation and deep sadness. The confrontation had been brewing for years, and now it had erupted, leaving a gaping rift between me and my family. As I drove away, the weight of the evening settled in. I had stood up for myself, for my choices. But at what cost? The pain of my father's rejection was sharp, yet there was a sense of relief too. I had finally spoken my truth, and in doing so, I had freed myself from the burden of his expectations. The chapter closed on a bittersweet note, marking the end of my struggle for my father's approval and the beginning of a new chapter, one where I could fully embrace my own identity, independent of my family's shadow. The confrontation at my father's house left me, Olivia, in a state of emotional turmoil. The drive home was a blur, my mind replaying the harsh words and the final painful severance of my familial ties. The house I returned to was quiet, a stark contrast to the storm of emotions raging within me. The next morning, I was scheduled to attend an important dental conference. My mind, however, was far from the intricacies of dentistry. As I prepared, my thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. It was my chauffeur, a service I had indulged in since my practice had become successful. "Good morning, Mrs. Olivia. The car is ready," he said with a polite smile. I nodded, offering a faint smile in return. The luxury car, a symbol of my hard-earned success, suddenly felt like an empty consolation. The conference was a whirlwind of presentations and networking, but my heart wasn't in it. My encounter with my father had left a deep scar, and I couldn't shake off the feeling of rejection. As the day drew to a close, I decided to make a stop at my parents' house. A part of me yearned for closure, for some sign of reconciliation. I arrived to find my father in the garden, tending to the flowers that had been my mother's pride. He looked up, surprise etched on his face. "Olivia, what are you doing here?" he asked. I took a deep breath, the words flowing out. "I came to say that I'm sorry for last night, but I'm not sorry for my choices. I've built a successful practice, Dad. I help people every day, and I'm good at what I do." He put down his gardening tools, wiping his hands on his apron. "I saw your car, Olivia. How did you afford something like that? You said your practice was just doing fine." The question stung, but I stood my ground. Yes, it's more than fine. I've worked hard, and I've made a good life for myself. A life I chose, not the one you wanted for me. Dad's expression softened slightly. "I just wanted the best for you, Olivia. I thought following in my footsteps was that best, but it wasn't." "Dad, it was never what I wanted. I found my own way, and I'm happy with it. I just wish you could be happy for me too," I replied, feeling a mix of relief and apprehension. He looked away, a mix of emotions crossing his face. "I don't understand your choices, Olivia, but maybe I don't have to. It's your life after all." It wasn't a complete acceptance, but it was a start. I nodded, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. "Thank you, Dad. That's all I ever wanted." As I drove away, I felt a sense of closure. The confrontation and subsequent conversation marked a turning point in my relationship with my father. It was a tentative step towards understanding and perhaps acceptance. The chapter ended with me looking towards the future, ready to embrace whatever came my way. The path I had chosen wasn't easy, but it was mine. And for the first time, I felt truly at peace with it. The resolution with my father marked a pivotal change in my life. The past, with its shadows of neglect and misunderstanding, had given way to a present filled with possibilities and a future unburdened by the need for approval. I, Olivia, stood at the threshold of a new chapter, one where my identity and achievements were defined by my own standards. As I settled into this newfound sense of self, my dental practice continued to thrive. I had built a reputation not just for excellence in dentistry, but also for a compassionate approach to patient care. My clinic became a place where people didn't just come for dental work, but for the warmth and understanding we offered. One day, as I was closing up the clinic, my receptionist, Anna, approached me. "Olivia, there's someone here to see you. Says it's important." Curious, I walked to the lobby and was surprised to see Emily standing there, looking a bit hesitant. "Emily, what are you doing here?" I asked, genuinely surprised. She took a deep breath. "I wanted to talk to you, Olivia. After what happened with Dad, I realized I haven't been the sister I should have been to you." Her words were unexpected, and I motioned for her to sit down in the waiting area. "It's been a long time since we really talked, Emily." "I know, and I'm sorry. I got so caught up in Dad's expectations and my career. I never stopped to see how amazing you were doing on your own," she admitted. I nodded, a mix of emotions swirling within me. "Thank you, Emily. It was an easy feeling like I was always in your shadow, always failing to meet Dad's expectations." "I know, and I wish I had seen it sooner. But I'm here now, Olivia. I want to be a part of your life, if you'll let me," she said earnestly. Her words were a balm to the years of distance and misunderstandings. "I'd like that, Emily. I really would." From that day forward, Emily and I began rebuilding our relationship. It was a process with its ups and downs, but it was grounded in a newfound respect and understanding for each other's choices. As my personal life found its harmony, my professional life soared to new heights. I was invited to speak at dental conferences, sharing my insights and innovations in the field. My practice expanded, and I began mentoring young dentists, passing on the lessons I had learned on my journey. One evening, I found myself at a dinner with some of the leading figures in dentistry. I was sharing a table with Dr. Helen Jacobs, a renowned dental surgeon I had always admired. "Olivia, I've been following your work," Dr. Jacobs said, her eyes reflecting genuine respect. "You've brought something special to this field. Your approach to patient care is exemplary." I felt a surge of pride. "Thank you, Dr. Jacobs. That means a lot coming from you. I've always believed that dentistry is more than just treating teeth. It's about treating people." She nodded. "And that's what sets you apart, Olivia. Keep doing what you're doing. You're making a real difference." The evening ended with a sense of accomplishment and a reaffirmation of my choices. I had not only found my place in the world of dentistry, but I had also carved a niche that was uniquely mine. This final chapter, New Beginnings, was about more than just professional success. It was about personal growth, healing familial relationships, and embracing life on my own terms. The journey had been long and fraught with challenges, but it had led me to a place of contentment and fulfillment. As I looked ahead, I was filled with optimism and a deep sense of gratitude for the path I had chosen. My story was a testament to the fact that sometimes the road less traveled not only makes all the difference, but also leads to the most beautiful destinations. My name is Diana, and once upon a time, I believed I was living the dream. You know the kind I mean. White picket fence, loving husband, 2.5 kids on the horizon. Essentially a life straight out of a romantic drama. The man responsible for painting this idyllic picture was Derek. Derek, with his chiseled jawline, sparkling eyes, and effortless charm. He was everyone's dream guy, including mine. I met him during my last year in college, and it was love at first sight, or at least it felt that way. Derek was a natural romantic. He knew just the right words to say, the perfect gestures to make. Within a year, we were engaged, and a year after that, I was walking down the aisle in a flowing white gown, beaming at the man I thought would be my forever. Ready to be my wife, Derek whispered as we stood in front of the altar, his eyes shining with what I took for love. More than ready, I replied, feeling a tear of happiness slide down my cheek. The wedding was gorgeous. We had roses everywhere, strings of fairy lights illuminating the room, and a jazz band that played our favorite songs. Our families were elated, our friends envious, and I felt like the happiest woman alive. But among the sea of smiling faces, there was one that never reached the eyes, my soon-to-be mother-in-law. During the reception, she sidled up to me with a glass of champagne in her hand and an unsettling smirk on her face. "Diana, dear, she could, such a lovely event. Though you could have chosen a better flower arrangement, don't you think? Roses are so pedestrian." I was taken aback, but I kept my smile intact. "Well, I always thought roses were timeless," I said, trying not to let her see how much her words had stung. "Timeless or cliched? It's a thin line, my dear," she retorted before sauntering off to schmooze with other guests. That was the first red flag, but like any bride basking in the glow of her wedding day, I chose to ignore it. It was easier to focus on Derek's adoring gaze, the cheer of our families and friends, and the dreamy atmosphere that had enveloped the day. I convinced myself that it didn't matter what my mother-in-law thought. What mattered was the man I had just married and the life we were about to build together. Yet even as we jetted off to our honeymoon, her barbed words kept creeping into my thoughts, and I couldn't shake the feeling that beneath the glossy surface of our picture-perfect life, something was rotting away. Like a little scratch on a shiny new car, my mother-in-law's attitude was a flaw in an otherwise pristine landscape. How big a flaw? I didn't realize at that time as we touched down in Bali for what would be a honeymoon filled with sunset and romance. I buried those nagging thoughts deep down. I was determined to focus on the good, on the love story that felt like it was written in the stars. If only I knew then what I know now, that some stars are destined to fall and some facades, no matter how beautiful, are built on shaky foundations. After the honeymoon, life was bliss, or at least I believed it to be. Derek and I settled into our cozy suburban home, a 2-story abode with a lawn we dreamed our future kids would play on. The initial months were the honeymoon phase magnified. We were that annoying couple, always holding hands, always gazing into each other's eyes. It was, in a word, perfect. However, my career began to take off. I got promoted twice in a year, my work earning me accolades and a pretty good salary. Derek, on the other hand, seemed to be stuck in a rut. His job was steady, but unlike me, he didn't seem to be moving up the ladder. One night during dinner, the elephant in the room decided to make itself known. Derek looked up from his plate, his eyes not meeting mine, and asked, "So, how was your meeting with the board today?" "It went well," I replied, cautiously optimistic. They were impressed with my presentation. There's even talk about another promotion. "That's nice," Derek said, but his eyes were clouded, his smile a touch too tight. "You don't seem too happy," I pressed. "Is something wrong?" "It's just, don't you think you're getting too engrossed in your work? We hardly spend time together anymore." That comment didn't sit well with me, but I tried to diffuse the tension. "I know, but these opportunities won't come twice. We both have to make sacrifices for our future, right?" "Yeah, sure," Derek mumbled, finishing his meal. Inside, silence. The air grew thick between us, yet we carried on like everything was fine, ignoring the fissure that had just cracked open in our lives. As if picking up on our issues, my mother-in-law began visiting more often. At first, it was once every few weeks. "So what's the plan then?" Derek asked, his voice tinged with a trepidation that made my heart sink further. "Simple. In 3 days, we put our plan into motion. I'll pretend to get violently ill after eating dinner here. We'll claim that Diana poisoned me," my mother-in-law stated matter-of-factly. My knees nearly buckled. Were they really plotting what I thought they were plotting? "Derek, are you sure about this?" I managed to press, my voice trembling. We discussed this, Mom. I can't let her outshine me anymore. I can't let her take everything away from me. It's my turn to lead, and I want what she has, Derek asserted. And you'll have it, she assured him. Once she's out of the picture, you can claim her assets. Her money will be your money, and people will finally see you for the successful man you ought to be. I felt as if the floor had been yanked out from under me. This was not a mere difference in personality or ambition between me and my husband. This was a calculated, malicious plot to sabotage me, to rob me of my life and achievements. My first instinct was to burst into the room, confront them both, and tear my marriage apart right there. But a second thought held me back. If I confronted them now, they would just deny it, and I'd have no proof. I needed irrefutable evidence to bring them down, and luckily, I had 3 days to get it. With my heart pounding in my chest, I quietly retreated, picking up my heels in my hands and tiptoeing back out the front door. I got back into my car, drove around the block, and then returned home, this time making sure to make my presence overtly known. "Hey, I'm home," I called out, trying to keep my voice steady as I walked back in. Derek and his mother greeted me with forced smiles, unaware that I had overheard their vile plot. It was a game of deception, and the stakes had never been higher. But now that I knew what I was up against, I was ready to turn the tables. They had 3 days to finalize their plot, and I had the same amount of time to unravel it, piece by damning piece. The next 72 hours were a whirlwind of plotting and planning. Every moment was a ticking clock, reminding me that my world could come crashing down if I didn't act swiftly and smartly. My first move was to contact a friend who worked in law enforcement. Without divulging too many details, I explained that I suspected someone might attempt to harm me and inquired about how to collect evidence. "Wiretaps and hidden cameras are tricky due to consent laws," he said cautiously. "But you could keep your phone on and record conversations." I thanked him and mulled over the idea. Recording a conversation without consent was illegal in some places, but right now, I felt cornered. It was my word against theirs, so I decided to take the calculated risk. The day of the planned incident came quickly. I could feel my pulse racing the entire day, but I put on the facade of an ignorant, happy wife. Derek and his mother arrived around 6 p.m., the tension in the air so thick you could cut it with a knife. But I pushed forward, serving them with a bright smile as though nothing were amiss. Before entering the dining room, I surreptitiously activated the voice recorder on my phone and placed it discreetly under a stack of napkins on the buffet table. "So, shall we begin?" I said, motioning for them to take their seats. "Absolutely, darling. Everything looks wonderful." Derek smiled back, but his eyes had a glint that I now recognized as deception. I served the first course, a creamy tomato soup that I'd made dozens of times before. As they took their first spoonfuls, my mother-in-law suddenly began to choke and cough violently, clutching her chest and collapsing onto the floor. "Diana, what have you done?" Derek yelled, his eyes wide with feigned disbelief as he reached for his phone. "I'm calling an ambulance." "No need for that," I replied, my gaze icy cold. Just at that moment, the front door burst open. Police officers rushed into the room, pointing at Derek. "Police, drop your phone and put your hands where we can see them." Derek looked bewildered, his gaze shifting frantically between me and the officers. "What is this, Diana?" As the police handcuffed him and his melodramatic mother, who suddenly seemed quite fit, I retrieved my phone and stopped the recording. "This," I said, holding up the phone, "is evidence." As it turned out, my law enforcement friend had taken my fears more seriously than I thought. He had kept an eye on my residence, and upon seeing my coded text that I'd sent just before dinner, had dispatched officers to my home, suspecting foul play. Derek and his mother were dumbfounded. Their plan had backfired spectacularly, and the recording was the final nail in the coffin. As they were let out of my home, their faces etched with the realization that they had lost, I couldn't help but think how swiftly the tables had turned. It was a gamble, one that could have endangered my own legality, but in the end, it had paid off. But it was a calculated risk I had to take to expose the venomous snakes I've been sharing my life with. Now, they were the ones facing the consequences of their actions, and as for me, I felt a sense of vindication tinged with the bittersweetness of a life-altering revelation. I had unmasked the villains in my story, but there was still much to be done. The battle was won, but the war was far from over. The days following the arrest were a blur of legal consultations, paperwork, and emotional turbulence. Even though I had collected evidence, my heart would still race whenever I thought about the courtroom. Our entire lives would be aired like dirty laundry for everyone to see, yet I had to steel myself for the confrontation. When the trial began, I felt like I was stepping into a different universe. The sterile courtroom, the gravity of the judge's stare, the lawyers pacing and firing questions, it was overwhelming. My lawyer had prepped me well, but nothing could prepare me for the moment when I'd have to face Derek and his mother in court. "Diana, is it true that you've been unhappy in your marriage?" Derek's lawyer sneered, trying to paint a narrative where I would be incentivized to frame them. "Unhappiness in a marriage doesn't justify criminal actions," I retorted, holding his gaze. The room seemed to hold its breath. When the recording was played, you could hear a pin drop as Derek and his mother's plotting voices filled the room. When it stopped, the silence was deafening. "Derek, do you recognize that voice?" the prosecutor asked. Derek hesitated. It sounds like me, but this is a setup." "She manipulated that recording," he claimed. "My son would never do something like this. Diana is just trying to ruin him," his mother chimed in. Then it was my turn. My lawyer asked, "Diana, how did you obtain this recording?" I suspected foul play and took measures to protect myself. I replied, keeping my tone steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. The jury took less than an hour to come back with the verdict. Guilty on all counts. Derek and his mother received a 4-year sentence for attempted fraud. As the judge announced the sentence, I looked over at Derek. His face was ashen, and his mother was beside herself. That night, I sat alone in the house that had once been the symbol of my marital dreams. I signed the divorce papers and left them on the kitchen table for my lawyer to collect the next day. For so long, this place had been a war zone, fraught with tension and deceit. Now, it was just a house, empty and echoing but filled with the promise of a new beginning. I got a notification on my phone. It was an email from my office. The board had decided to promote me to a senior executive role, a position that had been in discussion for weeks but was now finalized. A position that would have probably gone to someone else had my life been appended by Derek's plot. It struck me then how close I had come to losing everything. My career, my reputation, my freedom. But instead, the tables had turned. Derek and his mother were behind bars, and I was here, standing stronger than ever. I poured myself a glass of wine and sat down, taking in the quiet. For the first time in a long time, I felt truly at peace. I had taken control of my story, and while the road ahead would be filled with new challenges and uncertainties, I had turned a decisive page. The divorce proceedings went by swiftly, expedited by the criminal charges that had been levied against Derek and his mother. Within a month, it was finalized, and my lawyer handed me the papers with a somber yet triumphant look on her face. "You're free now, Diana," she said, packing her briefcase. "What are you planning to do next?" "I think it's time to write a new chapter in my life, one that doesn't include Derek or anyone else who wishes me harm," I replied, taking a deep breath as if to absorb my newfound freedom. My career blossomed in the following months. I took over significant projects and led teams to success. The company recognized my efforts, and I felt truly fulfilled for the first time in years. But I couldn't shake the feeling that the final chapter of my past was yet to be written. Derek and his mother were due to be released soon, their sentences reduced for good behavior. While they couldn't touch me legally, I wanted them to know that they had picked the wrong person to mess with. The opportunity presented itself unexpectedly. A mutual friend? A real estate agent? told me about a property that Durek had always coveted, a beautiful isolated lake house that he dreamed of buying for years. But given the divorce and his tarnished reputation, it was well out of his reach. On impulse, I bought it. My name is Olivia. If you had asked me a couple of years ago how I imagined my wedding day, I would have painted you a picture filled with love, warmth, and a groom who looked at me like I was his universe. As fate would have it, my reality didn't quite align with my expectations. I stood at the altar about to say my vows to a man who seemed like a perfect match on paper. Adam, an average guy with an average job who charmed me with his seemingly kind-natured and sense of humor. I wore a gown that took my breath away every time I looked in the mirror. Elegant yet understated, much like how I saw myself. My father had just walked me down the aisle, a moment we had both anticipated since I was a little girl. He kissed me on the cheek and took his seat next to my mother, who was already wiping away tears of joy. I turned to look at Adam. He was dressed in a traditional black tuxedo, but there was a look in his eyes that unsettled me. A distant, almost vacant gaze that failed to mirror the enthusiasm of everyone else in the room. "You look beautiful," he whispered to me, but his voice lacked conviction. I forced a smile and softly asked, "Are you okay, Adam? You seem a little off." He shrugged. "I'm fine, just a lot on my mind. Weddings are stressful, you know." I nodded, not wanting to create a scene. I took a deep breath as we turned to face the priest. The ceremony began, and my mind started drifting despite myself. Was I making a mistake? Was the subtle tension in Adam's voice a prelude to a life of hardship and disappointment? As the priest spoke, my mind was awash with questions I couldn't answer. "Do you, Olivia, take Adam to be your lawfully wedded husband?" the priest intoned. "I do," I said, my voice tinged with hope that perhaps this was all a figment of my overactive imagination. "And do you, Adam, take Olivia to be your lawfully wedded wife?" There was a brief pause. The congregation held its collective breath, and for a moment, I saw my life flash before my eyes. Finally, he responded, "I do," but the words seemed to stick in his throat. The priest announced, "You may now kiss the bride." As our lips met, the room erupted in applause, but I felt a strange emptiness. Something was amiss, and I couldn't quite put my finger on it. The celebration moved to the reception hall, filled with laughter, dance, and toasts to a happy life ahead. Yet, amid the clinking of champagne glasses and well wishes, I couldn't shake the feeling that the man I had just married was a stranger to me. We mingled with guests, smiling for photos, but every time I glanced at Adam, he seemed lost in thought. "What are you thinking about?" I finally asked him as we sat at our head table. "Nothing much, just a lot to process, you know," he replied, dodging the question once more. That night, as we drove away in a car adorned with just married signs and tin cans rattling behind us, I looked at my new husband. He was staring out of the window, lost in a world of his own, and for the first time, I felt a pang of dread about the life I had just committed myself to. But like any optimist trapped in a romantic ideal, I told myself things would get better, not knowing that this was just the first chapter in a long tale of deception, heartbreak, and ultimate retribution following the wedding. We moved into my house, a spacious place I had bought before we met, owing to my stable, high-paying job. Adam, a regular office worker, didn't earn much, but I was never one to judge a man by his paycheck. My philosophy was that love and compatibility mattered far more than financial equations. For a while, everything seemed to align with that utopian belief. Initially, Adam seemed like the perfect partner. He was affectionate, at least superficially, and took an active interest in my work, asking how my day was and even surprising me with dinner once or twice. But as days turned into weeks, the veneer began to wear off. "You're late again," I would remark as he stumbled through the door close to midnight, his breath reeking of alcohol. "Yeah, the office is getting hectic. You know how it is," he'd reply, avoiding my eyes as he quickly made his way to the bathroom, presumably to wash off the evidence of whatever he had really been doing. It was the 5th time he'd come home late in 2 weeks, and this time he looked particularly disheveled. I decided to probe a little deeper. Adam, is there something going on at work? You've been coming home late so often. I'm getting worried. He sighed as if annoyed by the question. Look, Olivia, you wouldn't understand. It's office politics, meetings, deadlines. Don't stress over it. His dismissal didn't sit well with me. I have deadlines too, you know. I manage a whole team, but I still try to maintain a balance. Isn't that what we should both be striving for? Adam rolled his eyes. You're making a big deal out of nothing. Just let it go. The word nothing echoed in my head, amplifying my growing suspicions. I had always been perceptive, a quality that had gotten me far in my career. I could read people, get a sense of their motivations, their sincerity or lack thereof. That sense was tingling now more strongly than it had on our wedding day, but I chose to suppress it. Maybe it was pride or perhaps a simple, naive belief that love could overcome all obstacles. Whatever it was, it blinded me to the glaring red flags that were popping up around me. The man whom I had allowed to be my partner in sickness and in health was slowly becoming a stranger. His late nights at the office grew more frequent, and so did his irritability. The laughter and easy conversations that had once filled our home were gradually replaced by a tense silence. I found myself walking on eggshells, choosing my words carefully to avoid igniting another argument over the smallest of issues. Our physical intimacy dwindled too. Adam always had an excuse, whether it was stress from work or just plain exhaustion. But the worst part was the emotional disconnect. The man who had once talked about growing old with me seemed increasingly disinterested in even discussing how our day went. I didn't know then what was unraveling before me, but what was clear was that our honeymoon phase had unceremoniously ended, giving way to a harsh reality that I was yet to fully comprehend. When the 2 lines appeared on the pregnancy test, a surge of emotions overwhelmed me. I was excited, terrified, but most of all, hopeful. The idea of bringing new life into the world with Adam made my heart swell. I thought, maybe just maybe, this miracle would be the catalyst that reignited the love and affection that seemed to have dwindled between us. I waited for him to get home, rehearsing how I would break the news. I imagined his eyes lighting up, mirroring the joy I felt. I was so lost in these musings that I didn't hear him come in. When I finally realized he was there, sitting on the couch flipping through TV channels, I approached him with the pregnancy test hidden behind my back. Adam, can you turn off the TV for a second? I have something important to tell you, I said. He sighed and put the remote down. What is it now? With shaking hands, I revealed the pregnancy test. We're going to have a baby, Adam. Actually, babies. The doctor confirmed it's twins. The room fell silent. The expression on Adam's face was not what I had envisioned. Instead of joy or even a simple smile, what I saw was a strange mix of incredulity and, to my shock, annoyance. Twins? Are you sure? He finally said, breaking the silence that had thickened the air between us. Yes, the ultrasound confirmed it. Isn't it wonderful? I replied, my voice cracking as I sought to find some semblance of the happy reaction I had expected. His eyes narrowed as he spoke. Great, more mouths to feed. Those words landed like a punch in the gut. I stood there, staring at the man who was supposed to be my life partner, trying to understand how he could react so coldly to something so monumental. Adam, what's going on? This should be happy news for both of us. Why are you acting like it's the end of the world? I asked. Adam slumped back on the couch, running his fingers through his hair as if weighed down by some unbearable burden. Look, Olivia, this is a big deal. It's not just a happy new situation, it changes everything. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Changes everything. You make it sound like our lives are ruined. These are our children, Adam, our family. He looked at me, his eyes void of the warmth and affection that had drawn me to him in the first place. I need time to process this, okay? I nodded, the lump in my throat making it hard to speak as I walked away. I couldn't help but feel that the unwanted miracle of our unborn twins had just magnified the widening rift between us. For the first time, I began to truly worry about the kind of father Adam would be, the kind of family we would become. I went to bed that night, my mind swirling with a storm of uncertainties. The excitement I had initially felt was now tainted by Adam's unsettling reaction. I looked at my reflection in the bathroom mirror, my hand instinctively going to my still flat belly. Am I bringing my children into a broken home? I wondered. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, Adam snoring softly beside me, emotionally distant as ever. The enormity of my situation settled over me like a dark cloud, and I found myself questioning not just my marriage, but the life that was growing inside me. It was the miracle I had always dreamed of, but one that had distressingly underscored the disquieting truth about the man lying next to me. The weeks following the revelation of my pregnancy were far from the blissful, love-filled days I had once fantasized about. As my belly grew, so did the chasm between Adam and me. The man who had promised to be my rock, my partner in this incredible journey, was nowhere to be found emotionally or sometimes even physically. As my pregnancy advanced, the housework began to pile up. Floors needed sweeping, dishes gathered in the sink, and laundry formed an untamed mountain. One day, after I'd spent an exhausting day at work, Adam strolled into the living room, kicked his shoes off, and plopped onto the couch. Adam, can you please at least put your shoes away? I asked, struggling to keep the fatigue out of my voice. He scoffed. You're home all day. Why can't you do it? I was at work, Adam, and I'm carrying twins. A little help wouldn't hurt, I pleaded. He looked at me as if scrutinizing my words and then let out an exasperated sigh. Olivia, I don't have time for this. I've got to leave for another business meeting. Another one? You've been away for the last 3 nights. When do you plan on helping around here? I questioned. When you stop complaining, he retorted, grabbing his coat and heading for the door. The days became a series of these confrontations, each one more bitter than the last. His late nights grew more frequent, and when he was home, he became increasingly irritable. Arguments erupted over the most trivial matters, and more than once, he seemed almost disdainful of my pregnancy, as if it was an inconvenience he hadn't signed up for. It all came to a head one chilly fall day when Adam declared that the garden needed cleaning, and it was my job to do it. Despite being visibly pregnant and the temperature dipping, he locked me outside to make sure the work got done. I can't believe you're doing this, Adam. It's freezing, and I'm pregnant. I protested. You'll manage. It's not rocket science, he snorted, locking the sliding door behind him. While I was outside, teeth chattering and hands soiled from the work, I noticed through the window that Adam was packing a suitcase. I have to go on a week-long business trip, he said curtly when he finally let me back in, ignoring my disheveled, frozen state. You can handle things here, can't you? He asked, not waiting for an answer before leaving. During his absence, I stumbled upon the grim reality that half his belongings were missing. I scoured the house in panic and discovered the safe was empty. A total of $250,000 I had saved up over the years had vanished. My calls to him went unanswered. That was the last straw. As I sat there surrounded by the life we had supposedly built together, the walls felt like they were closing in on me. I was overwhelmed by a cascade of feelings, betrayal, hurt, but mostly a simmering, righteous anger. It was time to accept that our relationship was not a two-way street. It was a dead end, and I was the only one who had been bringing anything to the table. The love, the support, and now even my hard-earned money. It had all been siphoned off by the man I had entrusted with my heart. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the storm that was about to come. It was time to change the rules of this twisted game. It was time for me to take back control of my life, and, more importantly, secure a future for the lives growing inside me. Little did Adam know, he had just ignited a fuse, and I was about to explode in a way he never saw coming. As the week crawled on, each day felt like a lifetime. But I wasn't idle. I was plotting. Adam had taken advantage of my love, my trust, and my resources. He had turned his back on me at the most vulnerable point in my life. But he'd forgotten one critical thing. I was his boss's daughter, and he was still on the company payroll. I arranged a meeting with my father and walked into his office with a file of evidence I had collected: late-night texts with unidentified numbers, receipts for luxury hotel stays when he was supposedly working late, and most importantly, bank statements that highlighted the missing $250,000. "Dad, we need to talk about Adam," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil within me. My father looked up, concern etching his features. "What's going on, Olivia?" I handed him the file. "He's been cheating, lying, and he's stolen from our safe. He can't continue to work here." My father leafed through the papers, his eyes narrowing with each page. "This is serious, Olivia. Are you sure about this?" "I've never been more sure about anything. He needs to go, Dad, not just from my life, but from this company." My father sighed, his hand rubbing the bridge of his nose. "All right, I'll handle it from here. He won't set foot in this office again." "Thank you, Dad," I said, feeling the first wave of relief wash over me. The next part of my plan was to secure my financial and legal standing. I contacted the police and formally reported the theft. I knew it would be a long process, but the wheels of justice were finally in motion. When Adam returned a week later, drunk and in the company of a strange woman, I was ready. The house was locked, and I had packed his remaining belongings in a box that sat outside the front door. "What the hell is this, Olivia?" he yelled, banging on the door, his words slurring. I'd opened the door a crack, not allowing him to enter. "It's over, Adam. You're fired from your job. I've reported the theft, and I want you out of my life." His eyes widened in disbelief, quickly turning into fury. "You can't do this to me." Before I could react, he punched me in the face. Pain exploded across my cheek, but it was overshadowed by a surge of adrenaline and resolve. "That's assault, Adam. Another charge to add to your growing list," I said, my voice steady despite the pain. His face paled, realizing the gravity of his actions. "You're going to regret this, Olivia." "I already regret ever meeting you. Now get out," I said firmly. He picked up the box, glaring at me one last time before stumbling away into the night. As I closed the door, my body shaking from the confrontation, I realized that this was just the beginning. Adam had unleashed a side of me he'd never expected to see, and now he would face the consequences of his actions. I touched my swelling belly, making a silent promise to my unborn children. Their mother was no pushover, and their father would soon understand the extent of his mistakes. Revenge had only just begun, and I was far from done. I had the law on my side, a supportive family, and a fierce maternal instinct that would stop at nothing to protect my future world. Adam had underestimated me for the last time, and as I went through the motions to legally dissolve our marriage, press charges, and reclaim what was mine, I knew one thing for sure. The hunter had become the hunted, and I was not going to miss my shot. The courtroom was cold, sterile, a fitting arena for the final chapter of a marriage that had turned just as icy. I was seated next to my attorney, files and evidence laid neatly on the table in front of us. Across the room was Adam, disheveled and visibly nervous, flanked by his own legal counsel. "Mrs. Olivia Davis, you may present your case," the judge intoned, turning toward me with a nod. My attorney began laying out the chain of events, punctuated by irrefutable evidence, text messages, financial statements, and even medical records documenting the physical abuse. "How do you plead to these allegations, Mr. Adam Davis?" the judge asked, his gaze shifting across the room. Adam's attorney whispered something in his ear before replying, "Your Honor, my client pleads not guilty to these allegations." The audacity boiled my blood, but I remained calm, composed. This was a battle I was more than prepared for. "Very well, proceed with your arguments," the judge instructed. Over the next hour, each side presented their case. Adam's lawyer tried to paint me as an overreacting, controlling spouse. They questioned the authenticity of the texts and claimed the missing money was used for joint household expenses, a blatant lie. Finally, it was my turn for the rebuttal. "Your Honor, I would like to call Mr. Adam Davis to the stand." Adam looked visibly shaken but complied, swearing on the Bible before sitting. Mr. Davis, you claim the $250,000 missing from our joint account was for household expenses. Can you please provide any evidence or receipts validating that claim? He stammered, I don't have them with me right now. Isn't it true that you have been staying at luxury hotels when you claim to be on business trips? Isn't it true that you have been engaged in extramarital affairs during our marriage? Adam glanced nervously at his lawyer, who signaled him to remain quiet. So you refuse to answer? I pressed. The room hung heavy with tension. The judge broke the silence. Your silence speaks volumes, Mr. Davis. After what seemed like an eternity, the judge finally spoke. Given the overwhelming evidence presented by Mrs. Davis, I am ruling in favor of the plaintiff. Mr. Davis, you are hereby required to pay $500,000 in damages for emotional and physical abuse, as well as for the theft of marital assets. This court also grants Mrs. Davis full custody of the unborn children. The marriage between Olivia and Adam Davis is officially dissolved. As the gavel came crashing down, so did the wall that had been suffocating me for months. I looked across the room at Adam, his face a mixture of disbelief and defeat. Thank you, Your Honor, I said, my voice unwavering, finally free from the shackles of a loveless, toxic marriage. As I walked out of the courtroom, a new chapter in my life was about to begin. Adam had underestimated me, belittled me, and tried to break me. But I emerged stronger, wiser, and more determined. The woman walking out of that courtroom was not the same one who had walked in, and she was never looking back. The battle was won, but the war had just begun. And this time, I was armed not just with the law, but with the fiercest weapon of all, unyielding resolve. I had 2 lives growing inside me and a newfound purpose nourishing my soul. My revenge was complete. Yet it was only the beginning of a life where I would never again be underestimated. As I stepped out into the crisp air, my lawyer congratulated me. You did well, Olivia, he said. No, I replied, touching my belly softly. We did well. And with that, I walked away, leaving behind a shattered past for a future filled with hope, strength, and most importantly, love for myself and for the beautiful lives I was about to bring into this world.